Oscar Pistorius, a famous Paralympic champion, is originally from South Africa and lives in the city of Pretoria. He was born on November 22, 1986, with a serious developmental disorder that caused his legs to be thin and underdeveloped. Oscar's family went through many hardships, and his parents often argued. He had a younger sister, and after her birth, his parents decided to divorce. However, his father continued to support the family financially. Oscar's mother taught him that one should not give up in difficult situations, but should fight instead. Growing up, Oscar was an active child. When he was just 1 year old, he had to have his legs amputated below the knee because they were not growing. At 17 months old, he was fitted with his first prosthetic legs. As Oscar grew older, he became stronger and decided to pursue a career in sports. He initially played rugby and water polo, but after injuring his kneecap as a teenager, he was advised to take up athletics for rehabilitation. Over time, his passion for athletics developed, particularly for short-distance running. At the age of 15, Oscar lost his mother, who had been his close friend and supporter in all his endeavors. This loss deeply affected him, leading to emotional distress, but he remained determined to continue his training and pursue his goals. His hard work paid off when, at 17, he won a bronze medal in the 100-meter race and a gold medal in the 200-meter race at the Athens Paralympic Games in 2004. In 2007, he showcased his talent again by finishing second in the 400-meter race. Despite his young age, Oscar has achieved incredible success that many can only dream of. He has attracted significant media attention and built a large fan base, earning him the nickname "the man who runs on blades," due to his special prosthetic legs and impressive speed. By 2012, Oscar had reached the peak of his athletic career. During this time, he met Riva Steenkamp, a 29-year-old South African model and law graduate, through a mutual friend named Justin. They felt an instant connection, often described as love at first sight, and began dating. They officially got engaged in 2013. Riva grew up in Cape Town with her father, Barry, her mother, June Steenkamp, and 2 half-brothers. The family later moved to Port Elizabeth, where she pursued a law degree at university. Riva was not only intelligent, graduating with honors, but she was also very attractive. She started modeling at the age of 14, initially as a hobby, but soon began to take it more seriously. By the age of 29, she had become a well-known face in fashion magazines, frequently appearing on television and participating in various shows. However, her life wasn't without challenges. At 20, she was involved in a serious accident while riding. Riva's father, Barry, was a renowned horse trainer and breaker. He introduced his daughter to riding at a young age, starting her off with a pony. When Riva was 20, she suffered a serious lower back injury after falling from a horse, which required her to nearly relearn how to walk. By 2012, she had fully recovered and had achieved both wealth and fame, similar to Oscar. Their first meeting was unplanned, but they encountered each other again at a major award event where Oscar was being honored. Photographers captured them together, and the media quickly labeled them a stunning couple, taking numerous photos and asking questions. Both Riva and Oscar were talented in their respective fields and appeared to be a perfect match. Eventually, they developed feelings for each other, began dating, and got engaged. On Valentine's Day, February 14, 2013, Oscar and Riva celebrated 3 months of their relationship with a dinner at Oscar's home. Oscar lived in a mansion located within a gated community, where all the houses were similar to his and were surrounded by tall fences for security. The residents were very wealthy and took extensive measures to protect themselves, such as using CCTV cameras, combination locks, and other security systems. The cameras at the entrance captured the arrival of Oscar and Riva. They enjoyed a romantic candlelight dinner and stayed up late into the night. Later, someone told the police that they had heard the sound of weapons exploding in Oscar's villa. Emergency services quickly arrived at the scene where a crowd had gathered to understand what had happened. Paramedics entered the house and found a girl lying on the bathroom floor, covered in blood. After examining her, they realized she was beyond help, she was dead. Oscar was found in the house, in a state of shock. The police tried to calm him, but he was so distressed that he couldn't comprehend what they were saying. He cried and screamed, eventually managing to explain that he had killed her because he thought she was a burglar. According to Oscar, after dinner, he and Riva went to bed. Early the next morning, he went out onto the balcony to get some fresh air, predicting that it would be a hot day. Suddenly, he heard a noise coming from the bathroom. Although he knew Riva was in bed with him, he didn't check on her. Believing that someone had broken into the house, he took a weapon from the nightstand where he always kept it. In his youth, he had been attacked by an unstable person and had received threats from envious individuals, which is why he took security seriously and kept weapons at home. That morning, however, he hadn't put on his prostheses and felt defenseless. When he heard a noise behind the bathroom door, he attacked it, trying to act quickly. Unfortunately, there was no burglar, only Riva, who had woken up and gone to the bathroom. Upon realizing her tragic mistake, she screamed for help, but it was too late. An investigation showed that Riva had been attacked 4 times. The first bullet struck her thigh, the second ricocheted and hit her back, the third shot hit her shoulder, and the final, fatal shot struck her head, killing her instantly. An investigation showed that Riva had been attacked 4 times. The first bullet struck her thigh, the second ricocheted and hit her back, the third shot hit her shoulder, and the final, fatal shot struck her head, killing her instantly. Early in the morning, Riva's family received a phone call that filled June, her mother, with dread. She hesitated to answer, knowing that calls at such an early hour often bring bad news. Inspector Bada delivered the heartbreaking information, causing her world to crumble. She struggled to stay upright as her legs gave way. Riva's father experienced several heart attacks after learning of her death. The next time they would see their daughter would be at the crematorium to say their goodbyes. Riva's mother, June, quickly informed the police of her concerns about Oscar, noting that her daughter and Oscar had ongoing issues. Although they were still in a relationship which had lasted only 3 months, it was clear that things were coming to an end. Riva's friend supported this perspective, revealing that Riva had expressed her desire to clarify their relationship on Valentine's Day and to break up amicably while remaining friends. Both the mother and friend shared similar views on the situation. In contrast, Oscar's friends expressed a different opinion, claiming that he was very happy in his relationship with Riva. The murder of Riva, a well-known model, by Oscar, a prominent Paralympic athlete, attracted significant media attention, leading to varying public opinions about the incident. Some people believed Oscar's explanation that the attack was accidental, while others suspected he may have had intentions to harm Riva. The authorities had not reached a consensus on Oscar's version of the incident. Many aspects of Oscar's story seemed to align with the details of his relationship with Riva. Friends of both Oscar and Riva stated that they were deeply in love, with Riva's friends confirming her happiness in this new relationship. She had previously experienced toxic relationships and felt fortunate to have found a good partner. Surveillance footage from a supermarket 2 days before the incident showed Oscar and Riva happily hugging and kissing while they shopped, appearing to be a couple in good spirits. This footage was presented as evidence during the investigation. However, a confusing detail emerged. Riva's friend claimed that she planned to visit Oscar's house on Valentine's Day to end their relationship, which raises questions. Why would she choose such a romantic day for a breakup? Additionally, during a police search of Oscar's home, they discovered a gift that Riva had prepared for him, a beautifully decorated frame with a collage of their happy moments together, accompanied by a heartfelt note expressing her love. This made it hard to believe that she intended to break up with him before giving such a romantic gift. The trial received significant media coverage, revealing an important detail. Oscar was deeply concerned about his safety and feared that someone might break into his house at night. This fear had troubled him since childhood, possibly inherited from his mother. After Oscar's parents separated, his mother and the children continued to live in a cottage where a thief had once broken in. Oscar, who has used prosthetic legs since birth, would take them off at home, leaving him vulnerable and unable to escape in an emergency. This fear was corroborated by Oscar's psychologist and his brother's friends. The weapon he had that morning was unlicensed and intended for self-defense. Riva's mother, June, informed the police that Riva's relationship with Oscar had recently taken a turn for the worse. A friend of Riva confirmed this, and several neighbors provided further insight. One woman testified that she heard Riva scream the night of the murder, describing it as a scream filled with fear, indicating that Riva was terrified for her life. Another neighbor, called as a witness by the defense, claimed he heard screams too, but he was convinced they were from a man, not a woman. Furthermore, during the trial, it was revealed that Riva was found on the bathroom floor, with the door locked and her mobile phone in hand. While it was normal for her to get up at night to use the bathroom, the locked door raises questions, particularly because she brought her phone with her. The prosecution investigated Oscar's history and discovered that years ago, he was involved in a serious boating accident on a river. He crashed into an obstacle and required immediate medical attention. Doctors performed surgery to repair his broken jaw and ribs, providing over 100 stitches. He was also diagnosed with a concussion and remained in a coma for several days. When police arrived at the scene, they found numerous empty beer bottles at the bottom of the boat. Eyewitnesses reported that Oscar was driving recklessly, screaming and laughing, while the boat sped down the river. After the accident, Oscar insisted he hadn't been drinking, but police tests revealed he was under the influence of alcohol. Additionally, it was revealed that Oscar had a long-standing problem with alcohol addiction. On March 3, 2014, the trial for the murder of Riva began. On September 12, Oscar Pistorius was found guilty of manslaughter because the judge determined that he did not intend to kill his girlfriend. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison. This sentence was considered lenient, and with good behavior, Oscar could have been released early. Over the years, Oscar gained many enemies and became concerned for his safety. The most notable adversary was prosecutor Jerry Nell, nicknamed Bull Terrier. After reviewing the case, he remarked, "Oscar is talking nonsense," and began searching for inconsistencies in Oscar's story. Jerry Nell, a dedicated professional, recognized that he was dealing with a man who had taken another person's life and sought true justice. After several court appeals, Jerry Nell succeeded in having Oscar's lenient sentence overturned. 2 years later, Oscar was back in court, facing charges of premeditated murder. Before the hearing began, the prosecutor wanted to speak with Oscar privately while he was under house arrest. He reminded Oscar that his home was protected by a 3-meter fence topped with electrified wire, along with an expensive security system and numerous motion sensors. Given this, where did the idea of a robber come from? The autopsy results showed that Riva had food in her stomach that she had eaten at 1 a.m., suggesting that she and Oscar had not gone to bed that night. The prosecutor suspected that Oscar was feeling jealousy toward Riva. As she prepared to leave, he became enraged. When Riva locked herself in the bathroom out of fear, he began attacking. This raised several questions. Why did Oscar start attacking? Why didn't he call the police if he believed a robber was in the bathroom? And why did he continue to attack after the first shot, especially when he heard Riva's screams? Overwhelmed by the prosecutor's portrayal of that night, Oscar struggled to respond. Jerry Nell assured Oscar that they would address many unanswered questions in court. The trial eventually took place, resulting in the judge sentencing Oscar Pistorius to 6 years in prison, a sentence that was similar to the original one. Oscar's lawyers later filed an appeal, which led to an increase in his sentence to 13 years and 6 months. As of 2023, Oscar can apply for parole, but he is still serving time in prison. Despite his repeated requests to be transferred to a different facility due to his fear of potential violence from other inmates, these requests were never granted. This marked the end of Oscar Pistorius' sporting career and public admiration. He was once a national hero, but his actions not only took the lives of others but also ruined his own promising future. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Michael Reese. In February 2015, around 8 p.m., the Morris Police Department received a call from a woman named Cindy Reese, 40. She reported that when she returned home from the store, she found the front door wide open. Inside, she found items scattered on the floor. Cindy attempted to contact her husband, Michael, but he did not answer. Feeling scared, she did not go further into the house. Instead, she went to a landline near the main entrance, called the police, and then walked outside. After the call, at 9:11 p.m., Cindy contacted Michael's father and informed him that their home had likely been burglarized and asked him to come immediately. Michael and Cindy lived in the Morris Center on Bank Street, right across from a police station. The police quickly went to Michael's house. When they arrived, they found Cindy standing outside looking scared. Inside the home, police found a chaotic scene, with a table overturned and furniture scattered about. They soon found Michael Reese, 40. At the back of the home, he was found dead on the floor in an unusual position. Michael had been shot in the back of the head. Michael Reese was born in July 1974 in Alabama. From a young age, he loved fishing. Michael finished high school and attended college, where he studied computer technology, eventually securing a job in that field. He was skilled with computers and often helped others. Although Michael got married, his first marriage ended in divorce due to his wife's infidelity. He didn't dwell on this loss since they had no children and continued to seek the right partner for himself. In 2008, Michael was introduced to Cindy by a mutual friend. They were nearly the same age, and a strong connection quickly developed between them, leading to a passionate romance. Cindy was born in January 1975 in Alabama. Her father served as an assistant pastor in a Baptist church, and she often accompanied him to work as a child. Growing up, Cindy was a model student who adhered to the rules. She graduated from college with a degree in accounting. In 1995, Cindy married, but her first marriage ended in tragedy in 2007 when she returned home from work to find her husband deceased. He had died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. Cindy was devastated by her husband's death. A year later, in 2008, she met Michael Reese, and they fell in love. They married on September 5, 2009, and spent their honeymoon at Disneyland. After the wedding, they moved into Michael's grandmother's house in Morris. Cindy worked as an accountant at the Jefferson County Courthouse, while Michael was a computer technician at St. Vincent's Hospital in Birmingham. The couple had no children and, like many in Morris, spent a significant amount of time at church. Cindy, who grew up in a Lutheran family, convinced Michael to join the Sardis Baptist Church. After his baptism, they attended services together every Wednesday and Sunday. Cindy was also the music director of the church. Unfortunately, Michael received sad news when his mother was diagnosed with cancer. Concerned about her health, Michael visited her often and spent much of his time caring for her. On February 14, 2015, Michael celebrated Valentine's Day with his mother, but just 4 days later, on February 18, he was tragically murdered. Michael was known as a kind and positive young man, generous and trustworthy. Police quickly opened an investigation into his murder. Michael had been shot once in the back of the head. Inside the house, everything was in disarray. The police suspected that the Michael family was targeted for a robbery that went wrong. On the table, there was still uneaten fast food. However, investigation revealed no evidence of a break-in through the front door. Hours after the murder, Cindy Reese was taken to the police station for questioning. She explained that on February 18, she and her husband, Michael, had gone to work during the day. In the evening, Michael picked her up and they visited Cindy's mother. Around 6 p.m., they attended a church service, which ended at 7 p.m. They then stopped at a cafe to order some fast food and take it home. As they were getting home, Cindy suddenly remembered that she needed to buy groceries and told Michael that she would go and get the groceries and hurry home. Michael took the fast food and left. Cindy went to the supermarket and was gone for about 30 minutes. When she returned home, she found the front door wide open. Worried, she looked inside and saw things scattered everywhere. She called out to her husband but got no answer, which scared her, and she decided not to go any further into the house. Worried, she immediately called the police and walked out. At that time, she did not know that her husband, Michael, was dead. Cindy reported that a .38 revolver and some jewelry were missing from their home. When asked who might have killed Michael, Cindy said that as she was driving near her home, she saw a strange man wearing a black hoodie walking down the street. She also shared that she and Michael were planning to have children and had even added a room to their home. They were in the process of renovating, with the assistance of a contractor. Cindy speculated that this man might be involved in the murder. The interrogation lasted for several hours. During this time, Cindy listed all of her close friends, co-workers, and acquaintances that she and Michael had interacted with. Police noticed that when Cindy mentioned an old family friend, she appeared very happy. Meanwhile, the entire town knew that Cindy was having an affair. Although everyone suspected her secret relationship, Cindy denied it and refused to admit to any adulterous behavior. Her lover was Jeffrey Brown, the pastor of the Baptist church. Church members mentioned that they had seen Jeffrey and Cindy kissing in the car several times, but for some reason, no one spoke up about it. During questioning, Cindy denied having an affair with Jeffrey, claiming that they were just friends who occasionally walked around town together. Jeffrey was also questioned. He stated that on the evening of February 18th, he was in another city, 50 miles away from Michael's family home, and had nothing to do with Michael's murder. Jeffrey openly admitted to having a romantic relationship with Cindy. They first met in August 2013 when Jeffrey was a candidate for pastor at Sardis Baptist Church. At the time, Cindy was a pastor and worship leader at the church, and she had been married to Michael for 4 years. Jeffrey was also married to a woman named Noelle and had 2 children. Michael's family developed a close friendship with Jeffrey. They spent time together and went on vacations. However, in late 2013, a secret affair began between Jeffrey and Cindy. This affair did not go unnoticed by church members, leading to rumors. As a result, Jeffrey was forced to leave the Baptist church because the leadership believed that an adulterer was not fit to be a pastor or a role model for the congregation. Before becoming a pastor, Jeffrey was a Marine, a police officer, and then a hairdresser. At the time of the Michael family tragedy, he was working as a pest control specialist. Jeffrey and Cindy continued their affair, and Jeffrey divorced his wife, Noelle. However, Cindy chose to stay with her husband, Michael. During questioning, Jeffrey expressed his frustration with Cindy's unwillingness to leave Michael, claiming that Michael had abused her. Despite the accusations, Jeffrey denied any involvement in the murder. After questioning Jeffrey, Cindy confirmed that she was indeed having an affair with him. She revealed that her relationship with Michael was fading. He spent too much time on his phone and playing video games, often neglecting her. On weekends, Michael enjoyed fishing and the couple rarely had intimate moments. In the summer of 2014, Cindy confessed to her husband, Michael, that she had cheated on him. Although he was understandably upset, Michael assured her that he did not want a divorce. The couple made an effort to repair their relationship. To celebrate their 5th wedding anniversary, they visited Disneyland, hoping to rekindle the romance they once had. Michael was aware that Jeffrey, Cindy's lover, had intentions of winning her over, which made him fearful for his family's well-being. While being questioned about her relationship, Cindy talked about her time with Jeffrey. When asked if Jeffrey could hurt Michael, she replied, "Of course not, Jeffrey is a very religious man." The investigation into the case is still ongoing. Police have not found any witnesses or surveillance footage to confirm that a stranger wearing a black hoodie was seen walking down the street on February 18th. A contractor who was doing renovations for Michael's family has a solid alibi. He was at the church at the time of the crime. The initial theory of a robbery was dismissed because there were no signs of forced entry. While some items were missing from the house, most of the jewelry was intact. It appears the killer intentionally created a mess by overturning tables, throwing blankets on the floor, and making it look like a robbery. Cindy claimed that she was in the store at the time of the murder. She said she bought orange juice and ham. When she checked out, she added a few small items to her cart and paid for everything. The police found it odd that Cindy would rush to the store when their refrigerator was already full. They had eaten ham and orange juice for breakfast, so it seemed like there was no real need to buy those things. Additionally, Michael and Cindy bought fast food for dinner. Cindy loved good food and her relatives often commented on this. People commented that Cindy would not let her hot dinner at home get cold and would not go to the store without eating her favorite hamburger and fries first. Police went to Cindy's workplace. In her office, they found a wedding photo of her and Michael displayed on a shelf, framed with hearts. Below, next to her computer, was a photo of Cindy with Jeffrey. Police also discovered financial documents showing that Cindy had paid for the apartment where Jeffrey lived using her credit card. Jeffrey had frequent financial problems. In addition, the couple shared a bank account and Cindy had always supported Jeffrey financially. Police also discovered cell phone records that showed what happened on the day of the murder. Evidence from Jeffrey's cell phone showed that Jeffrey was near Michael's home at the time of Michael's murder, specifically at a gas station. Police also uncovered a disturbing incident that occurred a few months before Michael's death. Jeffrey had spoken to two of his co-workers, who were drivers, and asked if they could kill the man who had murdered his wife. Jeffrey offered to pay the two co-workers with money in his car as payment, but did not specify who the target was. He only mentioned that the man drove a white Honda Accord and worked at St. Vincent's Hospital. The description matched Michael Reese, but his co-workers declined the offer and reported Jeffrey's alarming request to the police. Less than a month after Michael was murdered, Cindy Reese and Jeffrey Brown were arrested on March 11, 2015. Neither of them admitted guilt. Police believe that on the night of the murder, Michael and Cindy returned home with takeout and intended to have dinner together. When Michael went to the back door to let the dog in, Cindy shot him in the back of the head with a revolver she kept at home. After the shooting, she created a mess, took several valuables, and went to the store. On her way, she disposed of the gun and jewelry, then returned home and called 911. Police are convinced that both Cindy and Jeffrey were involved in the murder, with Jeffrey likely being nearby at the time and possibly helping Cindy afterward. After Cindy's arrest, she was released from prison and lived freely while awaiting trial. She chose not to post bail for Jeffrey, who remained in custody. Just days before his trial in August 2016, Jeffrey sought a plea deal that would allow him to plead guilty to a lesser charge of manslaughter in exchange for testifying against Cindy. He said that Cindy had instigated Michael's murder, explaining that she was afraid to divorce her husband because she was concerned about how her family would react. Jeffrey mentioned that Cindy had previously expressed a desire to kill her husband, which he initially interpreted as a joke. On the night of the murder, he claimed to have overheard everything that happened between Michael and Cindy on his cell phone. He reported hearing the couple arguing both in the car and at home, as well as gunshots. After Cindy killed her husband, she asked Jeffrey to help her get rid of the gun. They arranged to meet at a gas station, where she gave him the gun along with some jewelry, which he discarded. Cindy's trial began in November 2016, and she denied all of Jeffrey's allegations. She admitted to meeting Jeffrey at the gas station but said he asked her to come because he was out of money for gas. Cindy said she gave him $15 to help him. During the trial, she maintained that she and Michael had no intention of getting a divorce and wanted to work on their marriage. She also claimed that she no longer had any feelings for Jeffrey and accused him of stalking her, her family, and their home. Cindy's arguments were dismissed, as Cindy had not provided financial support to Jeffrey while at the gas station. Police also discovered that Cindy had frequently exchanged explicit photos with Jeffrey, suggesting that their relationship had not ended. Cindy's lawyers argued that she had no motive to kill her husband and placed the blame squarely on Jeffrey. The defense portrayed Jeffrey as obsessive, impulsive, and manipulative. No traces of gunpowder or blood were found on Cindy's body or clothing, and the angle of the gunshot wound indicated that the shooter was taller than Cindy, about the same height as Jeffrey. To this day, it remains unclear who shot Michael and what exactly happened that night. Prosecutors argue that Cindy did the killing, with Jeffrey helping her dispose of the weapon. In 2016, Jeffrey Brown was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 20 years in prison, with eligibility for parole in 2036. On January 11, 2017, Cindy Reese was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 40 years in prison. Her family believes she is innocent and is determined to fight for her release. In 2019, Michael's parents discovered that Cindy had been transferred from a maximum security prison to a lower security facility near the site of the murder. Michael's family went to court and successfully had her returned to a maximum security prison. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Justice Garrett. Justice Garrett, a teenage girl from Florida, USA, suddenly disappeared after school. As police investigated the case, they discovered the motive and the horrific events surrounding her disappearance. They were increasingly shocked by the brutality of the perpetrator, the most brutal in the history of the county. It had been just 3 weeks since Justice's 16th birthday. That day, she had overslept and woken up later than usual, causing her to miss the school bus. Her mother, Danielle, then 37, was busy getting her 5-year-old daughter ready for kindergarten and couldn't help Justice get to school. Danielle believed Justice could handle herself. Justice was going to return home by the school bus in the evening as usual. But she didn't return home at the scheduled time. Initially, Justice's family wasn't concerned because she had many friends and often stayed late with them after school. However, as time went on and she still hadn't returned, her mother and stepfather began to worry. They assumed she might be spending the night at her best friend's house. Since they needed to wake up early for work, they went to bed without waiting for her. But when morning came, Justice still hadn't returned home. Danielle grew impatient and worried about her daughter's whereabouts. Unable to reach Justice by phone, Danielle decided to contact the police for help. The police took the missing person report seriously and began an investigation. Police checked out places where Justice might have been, as they often see teens staying with friends before returning home. However, Justice's mother sensed something was wrong because Justice had not contacted family, which worried her. Police considered the possibility that Justice might have run away. Danielle said Justice often spent weekends with friends, and she often helped her mother take care of her younger sister and would not disappear without telling anyone. Justice always dealt with her problems instead of running away from them. And she always discussed any difficulties with her mother. Danielle was worried because all Justice's belongings were left at home. She believed something terrible might have happened to her daughter, so she insisted on starting the search right away. Despite the police's reassurances, Danielle's anxiety grew. Her daughter had never hung out with bad friends, and it was unusual for her to run away or avoid problems. Even when she was with friends, she would call her parents to let them know. However, she did not return any calls or texts. She was friendly and sociable, and did not use drugs or alcohol. It seemed completely impossible that she would just run away without telling anyone. Police checked Justice's database and confirmed her mother's story. She had no criminal record and there were no reports of her being in an accident. Police began searching for Justice by interviewing several teenagers, classmates, and acquaintances. Some said they had seen her sleeping in the cemetery, while others said she had moved in with a secret boyfriend. In fact, Justice had no boyfriend and had never been to the cemetery. None of these claims were true. Police interviewed everyone who knew Justice, including her teachers and classmates. They discovered that she had not been to school that morning. A review of surveillance footage along Justice's route and a check of her phone's geolocation showed that she left home around 7:25 a.m. to go to school, but she disappeared about 30 minutes later, on her way to school. What happened to Justice during that time? For days after she went missing, on April 17th, a man called the police. While out jogging, he noticed a strange, unpleasant odor coming from the edge of the trail, which piqued his curiosity and prompted him to head toward the woods. After walking a few meters, the man accidentally discovered a body. He then called 911. The police quickly arrived and discovered a female body that showed signs of severe decomposition. Although there was some minor damage caused by animals and the hot and humid weather, most of the damage was caused by a chemical substance. Forensic experts determined that it was a type of bleach that had been poured on the victim's body, likely to cover up the evidence. The identity of the deceased could not be determined on the spot and laboratory analysis was required. However, the police suspected that this could be Justice, the person everyone was looking for. Police confirmed the identity of the body as Justice after DNA analysis. Her body was found in a wooded area near Delanda, about a 30-minute drive from her home in Sorrento. Her upper body was badly decomposed, exposing her bones. Her lower body was less damaged, suggesting that she had been exposed to fewer chemicals. Although the exact cause of Justice's death could not be determined due to the condition of her body, it appears that she died from strangulation. Evidence showed that her pants had been pulled down to her ankles and her sweater pulled up to her neck, suggesting that a sexual assault had taken place. Unfortunately, bleach destroyed much of the evidence, making it difficult to prove this motive. It was clear that she had suffered multiple blows to the face, as her nose was broken in several places. Police interviewed the jogger who discovered the body and reported it at 9:11 a.m. He provided important information about the incident. The jogger said that on the 16th, while running on the trail where the body was later discovered, he noticed another person in the distance. He believed it was a man based on his build, but he was unable to provide further details because the person ran away when he heard the jogger approaching. This unusual behavior caught the jogger's attention, but he did not go any closer to the area or see the body that day. However, he returned several days later when he noticed a foul odor. The investigation confirmed that the jogger was not involved in the incident. He passed a lie detector test and had an alibi for the day Justice went missing. To gather new information, police carefully reviewed surveillance camera footage along the entire route Justice took, especially at the bus stop where she was supposed to board. Justice's mother initially claimed that her daughter had walked to school by herself. However, police soon discovered that this was not true. In fact, her stepfather, Robert, had offered to drive Justice to school that morning. Police were suspicious of Danielle's lie about how her daughter got to school, so they approached her more cautiously. This time, she changed her story, admitting that Justice had not walked alone. Robert had driven her in his car. She explained that she had lied because Robert's driver's license had been suspended and she feared he would punish her if she told the police the truth. And that Danielle thought her little lie wouldn't get in the way of finding her daughter. Unfortunately, the deception in this case made it difficult for the investigation to piece together what really happened. The police requested the school surveillance camera footage, which covered the parking lot. This is the location where Robert was supposed will drop her down. However, the camera was malfunctioning at the time and no footage was recorded. Therefore, it was impossible to confirm whether Robert dropped Justice off or not. However, multiple witnesses reported that Justice did not come to school and that no one had seen her that day. The only person confirmed to have seen Justice alive was Robert, and only he knew what really happened. The police brought Robert in for questioning. Eventually, he began to talk. On the day of the incident, Robert claimed that he never took Justice to school. Instead, he drove her to a nearby town at her request and dropped her off at the entrance of the town so she could meet a male friend. Robert suspected that this friend might be her secret boyfriend, whom she was dating without her mother's permission. In order to build a better relationship with Justice and gain her trust, Robert decided to comply with her request. However, Robert did not know the name or any details about the friend Justice was meeting. Justice then assured Robert that she could get to school by herself and planned to return by bus, so he felt that everything was fine. He could not wait for her because he had to go to work in the Volos district, and he did not have much time. Unfortunately, Danielle and Robert were unable to provide any useful information. The police then turned to Justice's friends, who all confirmed that she had recently started talking about a guy she met online. He had shown a lot of interest in her and texted her frequently, which she shared with her friends. However, Justice felt uncomfortable with his excessive attention and her friends believed that Justice would not date him. The police examined the Justice's social media accounts, looking closely at her likes, comments, recent subscriptions, and conversations. They discovered one account that had been in frequent contact with Justice over the past few months and showed various activities related to her. This account belonged to an 18-year-old man, whose profile picture featured a muscular young man. He had been flirting with Justice, expressing interest in getting to know her, and complimenting her. Despite mentioning that he lived nearby, police were unable to find anyone who looked like him, and none of her friends recognized him. Justice did not respond to his persistent messages, choosing instead to ignore him. However, police believe the social media account is crucial to solving the case. Police then conducted a thorough search of his social media accounts. They discovered a phone number associated with his account, but instead of belonging to an 18-year-old, it was registered to a middle-aged man named Robert Kern, Justice's stepfather. This revelation shocked the police. When they approached Robert again, he, who had initially been cooperative, suddenly changed his attitude and refused to communicate. The police were determined to find answers, especially since Robert had lied, and now all the evidence pointed to him as the prime suspect in Justice's murder. Despite his protests, police arrested Robert Kern. However, social media interactions are not sufficient grounds to charge someone with murder. At the time, Robert was very close to the family, as he had been dating Justice's mother since the previous fall. He often stayed overnight at their home and kept in close contact with the entire family. There was no evidence of inappropriate behavior toward Justice. Robert denied any wrongdoing and dismissed the idea that he had harassed Justice. He suggested that his frequent compliments were meant to encourage Justice, arguing that receiving attention from a man could be a compliment. However, this explanation seems implausible, as Justice ignored his messages and she thought he was weird for discussing him with her friends. The police, looking for evidence against Robert, decided to interview Justice's close friend, Rachel. Rachel explained that their friendship had recently become close, as Justice often stayed overnight at her house. Rachel mentioned that a few months before the tragedy, Justice had stayed so often that it aroused suspicion. It seemed that Justice was trying to avoid going home. Robert had also been staying at Danielle's house quite often in recent months. Could his presence have contributed to Justice's reluctance to go home? Rachel reported that Justice had spent nearly a month at her house in the weeks before her death. She observed that Justice had become increasingly anxious. Previously calm, she now flinched at any accidental touch and implied that she was afraid of Robert, her stepfather. Rachel recalled seeing Robert on the day Justice disappeared. She described him as looking very uneasy, to the point where she actually felt scared. This made her understand why Justice liked to stay at her house every night. Police decided to take a closer look at Robert's background, focusing on his social media interactions and cell phone calls. What they discovered was disturbing. Robert had a significant criminal record, including 2 burglaries dating back to the early 2000s. Recent search history showed that he had looked up drugs that could cause unconsciousness, such as chloroform, and that he had purchased the drug. He also spent a lot of time studying maps, especially the nearby woods, likely in search of a suitable place to hide a body. He also researched methods for disposing of evidence. After learning that bleach had been used on Justice's body, police ran a geolocation check on Robert's cell phone on the day Justice went missing. They discovered that he had not been driving and had not dropped Justice off at a bus stop or school. Instead, Robert went into a wooded area where Justice's body was later discovered. Police reported that Robert's cell phone was not working for about an hour during this time. Initially, Robert claimed that he was on his way to work, but this was false. In fact, he took Justice into the woods, where he attacked, raped, and killed her. Justice was later charged with murder and was held in custody until his trial began. The exact motive behind the crime was never revealed, as Robert did not reveal it until the very end of the trial. The prosecution argued that the crime was murder with the intent to commit rape. Robert chose not to testify in his own defense during the trial, but he never admitted to any wrongdoing. However, the prosecutor's office had enough evidence to charge him with murder. Robert's troubled criminal history was presented during the trial. He was first arrested in May 2019 in New York State on fraud charges and was held in the county jail. It was mentioned that in 1999, he had committed burglary and breaking and entering, which resulted in an 18-month prison sentence. 3 years later, he was arrested again for burglary and served a year in prison. The prosecution later proved that Robert's testimony was completely false. He mentioned that he dropped Justice off near the school early in the morning and that he worked as a carpenter. However, both of these statements were proven to be lies. After being caught lying, Robert tried to create more excuses. But they were all designed to fool the police. They were able to accurately track the movements of both Robert and Justice. They compared the timestamps on Robert's cell phone and the searches on his phone, which showed that he had been planning the crime for a long time. The prosecution argued that Justice had no chance of surviving from the beginning because Robert had intended to kill her. Vegetation from where Justice's body was found in Robert's car, although he claimed he had never been in the area. However, he had in fact been there at least twice after the murder. He returned to the location on April 16 to pour a chemical on the body to destroy evidence of the crime. At that time, he was spotted by a jogger. The prosecutor's office attempted to prove that Robert's actions were sexually motivated, arguing that he had intentionally kidnapped Justice in order to rape and harm her. Robert had been keeping tabs on Justice for a long time, and she tried her best to avoid him, so she was rarely home. Danielle, Justice's mother, was devastated by her daughter's murder. In her testimony, she said that Robert had discouraged her from calling the police immediately after Justice's disappearance, convincing her that Justice was just staying at a friend's house. He also pressured her to lie, claiming that Justice had gone to school by himself. At first, the Danielle did not understand why he made such demands, thinking that he was afraid of the consequences of driving without a license. After reviewing the case documents, the jury reached its decision in just 30 minutes. They found Robert Kern guilty of first-degree murder of Justice Garrett. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus 5 years for attempting to obstruct the investigation. Throughout the trial, he never admitted his guilt and showed no remorse for his actions. Despite the overwhelming evidence against him, he maintained his innocence until the very end. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Leon Britz. The Sharetha and Leon Britz case of 2020 not only shocked South Africa, where it took place, but also attracted international attention. From the very beginning, the investigation identified an innocent person as the prime suspect. Only through a surprising confession was the real culprit revealed. The Leon family, European immigrants, moved to the small town of Patter in the northern Cape Province of South Africa in the early 1970s. While Patter is modest in size, it plays a significant role as an economic and tourist center in the Bushmanland region. Leon has an older brother named Toki. Leon's family is relatively wealthy for their community. His father owns the only large hotel in the area, which later expanded into a large hotel and restaurant complex. Both Toki and Leon did well in school. After finishing school, Toki left his hometown, while Leon chose to stay. He helped his parents run the hotel as a teenager and studied business. Leon is intelligent and has a natural talent for business, which has helped him run the hotel effectively. At the Leon family hotel, many events, parties, and celebrations took place. During one of these occasions, Leon spotted a beautiful young girl among the guests. She was a brunette with green eyes and a charming smile. Curious, he approached her to introduce himself and discovered that she was only 14 years old and still in school, although she appeared much more mature. This revelation confused Leon, who was 25 at the time. Despite his concerns, he asked her to dance, and afterwards, they spent about an hour talking on the terrace. The girl's name was Sharetha, and from that moment, Leon could not stop thinking about her and eagerly anticipated their next meeting. Sharetha was born on September 6, 1990, the youngest of 3 children to immigrants from Eastern Europe. Her family faced severe financial hardship. When Sharetha was only 9 years old, her father died of a snakebite, leaving her mother to raise 3 children on her own, while struggling to provide for them. As a result, all 3 sisters had to go to work to help support the family, leading to a difficult and arduous childhood. Leon, a rich guy, suddenly entered her life. Leon truly loved her. He found every opportunity to see her, picked her up from school, took her to trendy restaurants, gave her expensive gifts and trendy clothes, and tried his best to make her happy. Sharetha experienced the luxuries and wealth. She realized that with him, she had the ability to build a family where she and her future children would never have to worry about money. Sharetha's mother approved of the relationship, despite her daughter's young age. She considered Leon to be trustworthy, decent, and kind, and no one doubted his sincerity. However, Leon's parents were quite concerned about the relationship, as it could lead to serious legal problems if it went too far. Despite their concerns, Leon insisted that he was willing to wait until Sharetha turned 18 when he planned to marry her. About a year into the relationship, 15-year-old Sharetha discovered she was pregnant. She was unsure about sharing the news, knowing that it would upset both her mother and her boyfriend. To hide her changing body, she began wearing baggy clothes and became quiet and withdrawn. Eventually, she couldn't keep it a secret any longer and decided to tell Leon. When she revealed the news, Leon was stunned. He realized that the situation would not only damage his reputation, but also create serious legal problems. Leon was worried about being accused of seducing a young woman, so he couldn't let that happen. He took her to a private clinic, where they confirmed she was pregnant with twins. Leon found a doctor at the same clinic who would perform anonymous abortions. Sharetha was heartbroken. Leon, who had promised to love and protect her, was now pressuring her to end the lives of their unborn children. Leon, who was older, convinced her that it was necessary. He promised that after marriage they would have children, but now having children would ruin their lives and their dreams of a happy future together. Left with no other choice, Saritha agreed to the procedure. She experienced physical pain for days afterward, but the emotional trauma was even worse, leaving her feeling guilty and deeply depressed. She isolated herself in her room, crying constantly. Her mother did not understand the severity of the situation, thinking that her daughter was simply upset after an argument with her boyfriend, believing that things would be better once they made up. A few days later, Leon visited Saritha at her home. He then took her into town to walk around the park and do some shopping. He thought this would help her feel better. Although she eventually returned to her normal routine, her feelings of resentment and suspicion towards him remained. 3 years later, during her senior year of high school, the Saritha discovered she was pregnant again. She was just a few months away from turning 18, and this unexpected pregnancy was not supposed to create any significant problems. However, when she informed Leon, he reacted very negatively and insisted that she terminate the pregnancy, claiming they were too young to start a family. This time, Saritha firmly refused, stating that she would keep the child, even if it meant raising it alone. After some consideration, Leon eventually proposed to her, presenting a diamond ring. By this time, the intense feelings they had for each other had faded, but Saritha's pregnancy left him with no choice. Shortly after her 18th birthday, the couple got married in a lavish ceremony. Although they appeared happy, they both had doubts about their decision. A few months later, they welcomed their first son, and 2 years later, they had twin boys. The family lived a wealthy life. Leon's parents built a successful business over many years. Leon also started his own fast food chain and restaurant, which was thriving. However, starting in the mid-2010s, the family faced significant challenges. In 2014, Leon's father suddenly passed away due to long-standing heart problems, which affected his mother's health. She began to show signs of rapid dementia, forcing her sons to take her to a specialist clinic for care. Toki returned to his hometown after many years to assist his younger brother in managing the family business, and together they took over the operation of a hotel. Leon decided to let Saritha join the family business, something she had always wanted to do. They agreed to register a mining equipment and tools store in her name. She worked hard at the store while also caring for their 3 young sons. However, as the twins grew older, the parents had to find a suitable school for all of their children. Finding quality education in South Africa was not easy. They eventually found a good school in the nearby town of Kakamas, about 75 miles from Leon's home. They then rented a spacious house in Kakamas for Saritha and her sons to live in, while Leon stayed in Poeter to manage the business. Although Saritha enjoyed running the store, she had to give up that role to focus on raising the children. The family only visited Leon on weekends and holidays, and he rarely came to Kakamas because of his busy schedule. At first, everything seemed fine between the couple, but over time, they grew more distant, and their feelings for each other faded. In 2018, Saritha began experiencing health issues, which she initially dismissed. However, medical tests revealed that she had cancer and cardiovascular problems. She quickly underwent surgery to remove the malignant tumor and began a treatment plan. Thankfully, the timely intervention saved her life, but she now required ongoing therapy at a clinic in Johannesburg, which was quite costly. Leon's family was able to pay for Saritha's medical expenses. To help manage the household while she was receiving treatment, Saritha hired a nanny and a maid. By this time, Leon and Saritha had grown apart and were living separate lives. Saritha began an affair in Johannesburg. It appears that Leon was also seeing other women, as evidenced by explicit photos and text messages found on his phone. The couple now only stay in touch because of their 3 children. Despite the family problems, business is doing well. The hotel, retail stores and restaurant chain are making a significant profit. Leon has invested some of this money in real estate in major cities, which provides a good income through rentals. Their family is not only the richest in Poitiers, but also one of the richest in the Northern Cape province. As Leon's business grew more profitable, he faced increasing threats from jealous people who wanted to harm him, his parents, and his brother. To protect his assets, he installed safes and hidden compartments in his office and home, where he stored cash in various currencies, stocks, diamonds, jewelry, and gold bars. Although the threats initially worried him, Leon eventually began to ignore them as they became a regular occurrence. He believed they were just attempts to scare him. A tragic event occurred that led to Leon's death. On October 7, 2020, Saretha called him to check on their dogs. A neighbor reported that they had escaped. Leon assured her that he would call back after checking on the dogs, but he never did. Worried, Saretha tried calling him several times, but no one answered. She left their children with a nanny and drove to their home in Poitiers. When she arrived, the front door was unlocked, but the house was eerily quiet and no one answered her calls. She went to the backyard and discovered her husband's body floating face down in the pool. There were wounds on his back, indicating that he was dead. In a panic, Saretha called the police, then contacted Toki to inform him of the situation. When the police arrived, they quickly sealed off the house. They found that Leon had died violently. His body had multiple stab wounds and signs of a struggle. A safe in the house had been opened and its contents taken. Initially, the police theorized that a burglar had broken into the house. And Leon was home at the time, leading to a confrontation that left Leon dead. However, many other valuables that could be seen in the house were still intact, suggesting that the burglars had specifically targeted the contents of the safe. Following Leon's murder, much speculation about the cause of his death arose on social media. Many people knew about the threats Leon had received over the years and suspected that competitors or enemies may have acted on those threats. Police later identified Leon's brother Toki as the prime suspect. Toki had managed the family business with Leon for many years and had visited Leon shortly before the murder, making Toki the last person known to have seen Leon alive. Complicating matters, their mother is critically ill, with doctors estimating that she has only a few months to live. It is rumored that Toki is unhappy with the way the estate has been divided, especially with Leon receiving the lion's share, and that Toki may want to change the will. This theory explains why other items in the house were left intact and why the killer only targeted the contents of the safe. However, Toki adamantly denied any involvement, claiming that he would never harm his brother, especially since they had never had any conflicts over money. He sought the support of Saretha, who expressed her belief in his innocence and offered to help him find a good lawyer. For nearly 2 months, the investigation had stalled with no new evidence, leads, or witnesses. Then, 35-year-old Jacques Van Vuren walked into the police station and proposed a deal. He would plead guilty and reveal the identities of his accomplices in exchange for a lighter sentence. Jacques and Saretha had been friends in school, and he had feelings for her, but she did not love him and eventually started dating Leon. They had not seen each other for many years, but one day they ran into each other at a shopping mall and started talking. Jacques was having a hard time at the time. He had gone through a divorce, lost his job, was an alcoholic, and was in dire need of money. Saretha realized that Jacques still had feelings for her, so she opened up to him about her unhappy marriage. She told him that her husband was abusive and treated her badly, but she felt trapped because he threatened to take their sons away and leave her nothing. Jacques was prevented from seeing his children by his ex-wife after the divorce, so he felt a deep sympathy for Saretha and wanted to help her. They exchanged phone numbers, and a few days later, Saretha called him with a tearful story. She claimed that her husband had abused her and that she could not leave him. She suggested that the only solution was to get rid of him. Suretha was a master of psychological manipulation, and Jacques believed her. Suretha also promised to pay him 500,000 South African rand, which was a lot of money, especially when he was in dire need of money. Jacques agreed to help her, but did not want to do it himself, so he decided to hire someone else to do it. After a while, Leon's business began to decline. All his chain stores began to close and suffered huge losses. Leon wanted to sell the hotel, but Suretha did not agree. At the end of September, Suretha and Jacques decided to start their plan. Jacques asked for half of the money in advance. However, due to financial problems, Suretha could only withdraw 100,000 rand and gave Jacques her diamond ring. With this money, Jacques hired a friend named Enrich Williams, who had a drug problem and was willing to kill for money. Enrich was worried that he could not handle a strong adult alone, so he brought in his friend Amantel Bareki to help him with the plan, and Enrich would share the proceeds with Amantel. Suretha gave the criminals her home address and told them where the safe was. She allowed them to take valuables from the house to make it look like a robbery. The only condition was that the dogs were not harmed, so they were released first. The neighbors noticed that the family's dogs were out and called her. This indicated that Enrich and Amantel were in the house. She then called her husband Leon to lure him into a trap. When he entered the house, one of the criminals hit him on the head with a baseball bat, while another attacked him with a knife, leaving him no chance to defend himself. Leon was stabbed 8 times and beaten with the bat several times. They then dumped his body in the swimming pool. After opening the safe, Amantel and Enrich found no cash, only securities, diamonds, and gold bars. They gave all the stolen goods to Jacques, who then gave them all to Suretha. The criminals chose not to take anything else from the house because they were worried about leaving too much evidence. They were relying solely on the large payment that Suretha had promised. Jacques was not allowed to be present at the crime scene. Suretha was worried that he might be identified on surveillance footage, especially since Toki had seen him several times and knew him as Suretha's friend at school. Jacques was only tasked with transferring the advance payment and instructing his accomplices to carry out the plan. Jacques was so worried about everything that he drove past Leon's house several times to make sure the criminals were ready and Leon was home. Jacques' car was caught on surveillance footage. While the license plate was unclear, the police took note of the car and its identifying features, eventually identifying the owner. Additionally, there was no money in the safe, and all of the family's accounts were frozen during the investigation. Suretha could not pay the hired criminals because selling the stolen goods, such as diamonds, gold bars, or securities, would reveal her involvement. She asked them to be patient, but Enrich and Amantel refused and began threatening Jacques. In desperation, Jacques does not receive the money he expected and feels guilty. Amantel and Enrich threaten him repeatedly, and he realizes that he faces the possibility of going to prison or suffering the same fate as Leon. He confides in his sister, who speaks to their mother, and together they convince Jacques to turn himself in. They advise him to expose the others involved in the scheme so that he can receive a lighter sentence. Jacques' real motive, in his full confession to the police, was that he believed he had done a noble deed, because he saw Leon as a man who had treated his wife badly, abused her, and threatened to kidnap their children. Suretha reported to the police about the will and property disputes between Leon and Toki. She wanted to imply that Toki was the culprit. However, the police decided to investigate Suretha thoroughly to find out her true intentions. During the investigation, it was discovered that Suretha and Leon had long since fallen out of love and were living apart. Suretha had a lover in Johannesburg, and she wanted to leave Leon to be with him. However, when she asked for a divorce, Leon firmly refused and threatened to take everything from her, including their children. It's difficult to determine Leon's true motivations, but it's likely he still cared for Saratha and wanted to repair their marriage. Meanwhile, Saratha had a plan to inherit his money and business after his death, which would allow her and her lover to live well. She also wants to removal of Toki by setting him up to become a killer, after which she will become the sole owner of the hotel, store, and restaurant after her mother-in-law passes away. Her plan can work if there is money in the safe and if she pays the hired criminals. In the spring of 2021, the trial and sentencing of all involved took place. The court considered each participant's role in this high-profile case. Jacques Van Vuren, who collaborated with the prosecution, provided detailed testimony and named his accomplices. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison, eligible for parole after 5 years. The hired criminals, Enrich Williams and Amantal Barecki, were convicted of premeditated murder with added cruelty and robbery. They received life sentences with no chance of parole. Saratha Brits, who planned to kill her husband, convinced the court that she was the victim throughout their relationship. She claimed that Leon forced her to have sex when she was 14. A year later, after she became pregnant, she alleged that Leon forced her to have an abortion late in her pregnancy. Although their love faded, Leon refused to divorce her and threatened to take custody of their children. Saratha was eventually sentenced to 25 years in prison. The court took into account her remorse, her sincere confession, and her role as a mother to 3 young children. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Teresa Parker. Teresa Parker was born on September 9, 1965, to Claire and William. The family initially lived in San Diego, California. They later moved to a home in Lafayette, Georgia, where they settled permanently. Teresa had 5 siblings. She was the middle child. Her friendly and kind nature made her popular with all her relatives. In 1984, Teresa graduated from high school. Soon after, she married her first love. After a while, the couple separated in the early 90s. Teresa completed her training and became a switchboard operator for the city police department, quickly becoming a favorite of the police officers. One of those who loved her was Sam Park, born in 1956 in Lafayette. He had an older sister named Caroline and a younger brother named Kenneth. Sam had a close relationship with his father. Overall, he was a kind and intelligent person. In his spare time, he enjoyed exploring the outskirts of the city, hunting and fishing in the many freshwater bodies nearby. When Sam turned 18, he joined the military and later became a police officer. In the early 1980s, his younger brother Kenneth admired him and chose a similar career, serving in the Marine Corps before joining the police department. Inspired by Sam, Kenneth decided to go to law school. For Sam, becoming a police officer was a lifelong dream. During his career, he once saved a child from a burning building. When Teresa, a beautiful 20-year-old new switchboard operator, joined the police department, she caught the attention of many of the officers, including Sam. They quickly became friends, and before long, Sam asked her out. Their relationship blossomed and they became a couple. However, some of Teresa's relatives noticed that Sam sometimes had difficulty controlling his jokes and could easily get angry. Both Teresa and Sam had experienced failed relationships in the past. Teresa had been married once, while Sam had been married twice. He saw his new relationship with Teresa as an opportunity to start over. The couple married on September 11, 1993. Teresa, 28, married Sam Parker, 37, who had just been promoted to city police sergeant. Although the early years of their marriage were happy, their relationship began to deteriorate over time. They argued frequently, and the conflicts were severe. There were concerns that Sam might have violent tendencies. They later filed for divorce in August 2006, after nearly 13 years together. However, by the winter of 2006, they had reconciled and decided to continue their relationship. In March 2007, Teresa decided to end their relationship and went on vacation to Mexico without her husband. After returning from vacation, Teresa started looking for a new place to live in another city, while Sam would stay in their old house. She took a few days off to move and settle into her new home. The next day she moved her belongings to a new apartment. Then she visited her sister, Christina, who now lived near her. In the evening, Teresa left Christina's house. She drove her SUV back home. At around 10:30 a.m., she visited her good friend Rhonda's house. Although she had planned to go to her old house to move her belongings, she decided to stay longer to make sure that Sam had gone out and did not see her. She wanted to avoid any arguments. Rhonda was surprised that the once loving couple were now avoiding each other. Teresa revealed that Sam had always been short-tempered and aggressive, especially when he was drinking. They then ended their conversation. Rhonda went to bed while Teresa went to her ex-husband's house. The next morning at 6 a.m., Rhonda called her. Someone answered the phone, but there was silence on the other end. After a moment of silence, the call was disconnected. Rhonda tried to contact Teresa several more times but only got her voicemail. Rhonda called all the numbers Teresa had used, including her work number, but none of them worked. Concerned, Rhonda then contacted the police station to request a welfare check on Teresa, who did not return her calls. In the workplace, everyone was worried about Teresa's absence because she had never missed a shift before. A police team was sent to check on her at her ex-husband Sam's house. About half an hour after the call, around 6:30 a.m., the police arrived at Sam's house but got no response when they knocked on the door. They then searched the area, looking through the windows. They hoped to find Teresa's car to make sure she was okay, but only Sam's pickup truck was in the garage. The police then went to Teresa's new apartment, but no one answered the door there either, so they left without any information. The police later found Teresa's SUV near her ex-husband's house. No one saw her, even Sam tried calling her many times to ask about her. Initially, her relatives weren't too worried, thinking that Teresa was busy arranging her new apartment and might not have heard her phone while cleaning. However, it was unusual for her not to answer any calls, as that was not her typical behavior. The day passed without any updates on Teresa. Christina had a hunch that Teresa was in danger. Teresa's family then officially reported her missing to the sheriff. From the beginning, the police treated the case as a top priority. They sent several officers to talk to Teresa's ex-husband, Sam, to gather information about the events leading up to her disappearance. The Georgia Federal Bureau of Investigation became involved in the case. They had known about Teresa's family's domestic violence for years. On May 4, 2002, police were called by Teresa's neighbors to report that Sam was drunk and extremely aggressive. He had been drinking all day and was violent toward Teresa. The patrol officer observed a bruise on Teresa's face, indicating that she had recently been beaten. Despite this, she chose not to file charges against her husband. The next incident occurred on April 27, 2003, while they were on vacation in Florida. They were dining at a restaurant when her husband became intoxicated and began threatening to kill Teresa in front of others. She then attempted to leave the parking lot in her car. At that point, Sam pulled out his service weapon and fired several shots into the car. Even after the police arrived, he continued to verbally abuse her and denied firing his weapon. When Teresa accused him of something, Sam threatened to commit and end his own life. As a result, Sam was taken to a mental health facility in Florida, where he was held for 72 hours for evaluation. Doctors were particularly concerned about his disturbing statements, such as his claim that he knew how to dispose of a body without leaving a trace. Additionally, Sam had extensive experience concealing evidence. He is very familiar with the local area, including the least frequented locations. Kayla, Sam's ex-wife, described him as an alcoholic. When he drank, he became aggressive and violent. She recounted an incident where he smashed a glass on the floor in a fit of rage, then grabbed her by the hair and dragged her through the broken pieces. He then chained her to the bed and only released her in the morning when he left for work. He also strangled Kayla and threatened her with a gun. She eventually escaped the abusive relationship by moving to another city to get away from him. The police were eager to solve Teresa's case quickly, especially since it involved 2 police officers, which would affect the reputation of the police department. They began by investigating Teresa's new apartment and Sam's house. When police arrived at Teresa's apartment, they found a note on the door from the courier saying that Teresa's order could not be delivered. Inside the house, everything appeared normal, with several cardboard boxes filled with Teresa's belongings. The police then searched Sam's home 5 times, which frustrated him, especially when they confiscated his hunting weapons for examination. Ultimately, the searches yielded no clues to Teresa's disappearance. All of her belongings, including her money and phone, were left behind. There was no activity on her bank accounts, so the possibility of her running away was rejected. At the end of March 2007, the entire Lafayette community was in confusion. Teresa had disappeared and no one knew where she was. This left everyone worried and many avoiding going out after dark. Those close to her suspected that Sam had something to do with it. However, Sam also expressed concern about Teresa's disappearance. He explained that she wanted to avoid divorce proceedings, so she ran away. However, this explanation did not seem reasonable. Hundreds of residents volunteered to assist police in searching for Teresa. Police made numerous attempts to locate her. Divers searched all local waters, and areas such as underwater caves were explored with robotic cameras. Posters with Teresa's image were placed on billboards and flyers were distributed throughout the community. During the search, police found no sign of her. The situation was further complicated by the rugged terrain, which included dense forests, numerous small lakes, and mountains. The police questioned everyone who knew Teresa. Within a week, the police had interviewed over 100 people. During these interviews, it became clear that Sam had a volatile personality, was extremely jealous, and lost control when he drank. Meanwhile, Teresa was determined to save their marriage. She kept her husband's abuse a secret and did not share it with anyone, although her relatives suspected that there were serious problems in their family. In March 2007, everyone was relieved when Teresa decided to divorce her husband, and they supported her decision. However, Sam's family had a different view of him. They described him as cheerful and kind, and although he struggled with alcoholism. Sam's brother claimed that most of their conflicts were actually caused by Teresa's actions, rather than by Sam. Only Sam's younger sister spoke up, saying that he did have a quick temper and, unlike Teresa, he often escalated conflicts instead of stopping them. On March 25, police interviewed Sam. At the time, he was not considered a suspect. However, during the interview, he provided information that contradicted what police knew. Sam claimed that he saw Teresa's car in the parking lot when he went fishing that morning. This claim was dismissed by police, as they did not find her car at the house at the time. The car later appeared near the house, but no one witnessed how it got there. He also falsely claimed that he had not contacted Teresa, but police discovered several calls he had made to her that morning. While this may seem like a small lie, it aroused suspicion, leading the investigation to take a closer look at Sam. Sam presented a different version of events. He suggested that Teresa may have run off with her boyfriend, Elvis, whom she had allegedly met on a recent trip to Cancun, Mexico. To investigate this claim, police traveled to Mexico. They interviewed hundreds of people, including tour guides, hotel staff, and local residents. However, they found no clues or evidence to support the story, nor could they identify her boyfriend, Elvis, which led them to doubt his story. Despite growing concerns about the case, Sam continued to deny any involvement in the crime. On April 3rd, police arrested a man in connection with Teresa's disappearance. To the shock of many, it was not Sam who was arrested, but his colleague, Ben Chapin. Police kept the details of the arrest secret. Ben was eventually released and cleared of any wrongdoing. Meanwhile, Sam was fired from the police department after 25 years of service due to his abusive behavior toward his ex-wives. He was permanently banned from returning to the force after his suspension. An internal investigation into Sam discovered explosives in his personal locker. The investigation into Teresa's case took months. Police were initially puzzled when Teresa's car returned to a parking lot near Sam's home. They discovered blood stains and signs of thorough cleaning in the car. Additionally, the trunk mat was missing. DNA analysis showed a sample belonged to Teresa, while they also found Sam's DNA in the same location. The police decided to arrest Sam. On February 4, 2008, nearly a year after Teresa's disappearance, police arrived at Sam's home, opened the door, and were arrested without resistance. The next day, he faced multiple charges, including murdering Teresa, invasion of privacy via computer, violation of public servant's oath, and invasion of citizen privacy. He was held without bail. Despite these charges, Sam maintained his innocence. Teresa's family, meanwhile, continued to insist that Sam was responsible for her disappearance, insisting that she feared him and did not want to return home. Despite the murder charges against Teresa, police have yet to find her body. Under state judicial practice, the chances of the prosecution winning the case are slim. Traditionally, few murderers have been convicted in cases where the victim's body is missing. As a result, the prosecution relied heavily on witness testimony, including Sam's ex-wives and Teresa's relatives. On August 17, 2009, in Walker County Superior Court, the prosecution alleged that Sam Parker had a history of violence against all of his ex-wives and was involved in an attempted murder. Sam had once confessed to his doctor that, as a police officer, he knew how to effectively hide a body. The prosecution detailed an incident that occurred when Teresa came to Sam's house to collect some of her belongings. They then got into an argument. During the argument, he killed Teresa, put her body in the trunk of her car. He then disposed of her body and carefully washed the car to remove any evidence. He then called his friend Ben and confessed that he had shot Teresa and planned to hide her body somewhere where it would never be discovered. He asked Ben to keep this conversation a secret. Ben shared his story just before the trial after reaching a deal with the prosecutor to drop all charges against him. Ben was supposed to testify against Sam. The prosecution said that during the time Teresa was missing, Sam suffered scratches on his hands and face. The prosecutor's office believes that these scratches were caused by Teresa in self-defense. Sam's attorney argued that he did not touch Teresa or her car. Teresa may have injured herself and then cleaned up the evidence and threw away an old rug before disappearing. The defense argued that all of the prosecution's evidence was circumstantial. Sam accused Teresa of having an affair. He even investigated her while she was on vacation and discovered that she had booked a double room, even though she was traveling alone. She also used a false name when booking the room. Sam suspected that Teresa had secretly met with his colleague, a police officer who had searched their home 5 times, but his colleague denied the allegations. Ultimately, the choice of the double room could simply have been because it had a large bed for comfort, or perhaps there were no single rooms available at the hotel. Sam still denies any involvement in the crime, arguing that there is no strong evidence to prove his involvement in the case or confirm Teresa's death. The jury was deadlocked and unable to reach a verdict, leading to the decision to retry. On December 3, 2009, 2.5 years after Teresa's disappearance, Sam Parker was convicted of murder, and he was also charged with obstructing and violating the oath of office of a civil servant. Sam was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus 5 years. Sam continued to maintain that he had nothing to do with Teresa's disappearance. After the trial, he requested a new trial, but his appeal was denied. 3.5 years after Teresa's mysterious disappearance, on September 20, 2010, 2 farmers found a human jawbone in a cornfield near the Chattooga River in Georgia, after a flood. A search party later discovered a nearly complete skeleton, and dental records confirmed that it belonged to Teresa. Her death was finally officially recognized. The cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma to the head from a hole in the skull, not a gunshot wound. The discovery site was 100 kilometers from her home and on the route that Sam had taken to fish. Was confirmed by geolocation data. This led the police to conclude that Sam was responsible for Teresa's murder. Despite this evidence, Sam Parker maintained his innocence. He is currently serving a life sentence in prison. Hey detectives, welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Jamie Haggard. David Haggard was born on February 23, 1974, in Woodinville, Washington, United States. He is the oldest son of Arthur Richard, an agricultural worker, and his biological mother is largely unknown. When he was 15, Arthur had 2 more children with another wife, daughters Stephanie and Jamie Haggard. Jamie, the youngest, was born on December 2, 1980, in King County, Washington. She was cherished and spoiled by her father, Arthur. He sought to fulfill her every wish from the moment she was born. Jamie and Stephanie grew up very close. They often dressed alike and did activities together, making them look like twin sisters, due to their small age difference. Jamie loved spending holidays by the water, whether at the sea or a nearby lake, and frequently asked Arthur to take them to Poplavino when the opportunity arose. David's life as the oldest child was far from peaceful and happy. Unlike his father's and younger sister's lives. He moved to California, where he had to adapt to a new family that he barely knew. Feeling lonely and lacking parental affection, he turned to illegal substances in his teenage years. This marked the beginning of his downward spiral. He started with minor offenses, but things escalated. One day, David took a car without the owner's permission and was arrested for theft. He was released afterward, but did not learn from this experience and continued to engage in criminal behavior. Soon after, he was arrested twice for possessing illegal substances. His last arrest in 2005 resulted in a 2-year prison sentence, but he was paroled after a year due to his youth. The state decided to grant him a chance to clear his record on the condition that he remain offense-free for 5 years. If successful, he could have his 3 felony convictions in California erased, leaving him with a clean record. After all the incidents, he returned to Washington. Meanwhile, Jamie is entering her teenage years, and this has brought many changes for her. She became more independent and no longer looked up to her older sister Stephanie. She has big ambitions and sets high goals for the future. After graduating from high school, she dreamed of becoming a doctor. Ultimately, she chose to become a physician assistant. During this time, she met a young man named Jake, who came from Woodinville. They quickly became close, and their friendship gradually developed into love. In 2008, at just 19 years old, Jamie gave birth to twin girls, whom she named Dylan and Madison Rose. However, Jake and Jamie's relationship faced many challenges, and they split up shortly after their daughters were born. Despite the breakup, they maintained a friendly relationship and communicated regularly for the sake of their daughters, sharing custody without any issues. Jamie also successfully completed his studies and got a steady job at a medical center. David still had trouble during this time. He started using illegal drugs again, and his behavior became erratic and aggressive. As a result, he was arrested for public disorder conduct. Fortunately for David, at his hearing, he reached a plea deal with the prosecutor. The court decided to defer his sentencing again and placed him on probation, requiring him to undergo regular alcohol testing. He attended an anger management workshop and pledged not to repeat his illegal behavior in the future. Since his sentence was suspended, but not vacated, this means his previous crimes will still be on his record. Meanwhile, Jamie began a new relationship. Although her family didn't know much about the man she was dating, she called him her fiancé. Unfortunately, the relationship didn't go as she had hoped, and the romantic phase ended, leaving Jamie feeling upset. Seeking support, she decided to move in with a friend, which meant her children, the twins, stayed with their father, Jake. However, Jamie still made an effort to spend as much time as possible with her children to make up for her absence. David continued to engage in illegal activities. In 2016, he got into a fight with a friend over a car. Fueled by anger, he broke into his friend's house, where he stole several items, including a toaster and a refrigerator. Given his criminal background, he wanted to avoid being caught, so he set the house on fire. Initially, investigators couldn't determine the cause of the fire, but they discovered a crowbar at the entrance, suggesting that someone had forcibly entered the home. A few months later, in March, Jamie found a new place to live. She rented a house in Canmar, a small town on the shore of North Lake, Washington, just a 15-minute drive from Woodinville. David, who was homeless but still in touch with his family, approached Jamie. She kindly invited David, her half-brother, to stay with her for a few days. However, whether out of manipulation or convenience, David ended up moving in permanently. At first, his stay with she seemed to cause no inconvenience. Sharing the rent with him made her feel like she had gotten through a difficult period in her life. As time went on, the differences between Jamie and her half-brother David became more noticeable. She started to dislike his personality and habits, but they did share one common issue: both were using illegal drugs. To support her addiction, Jamie began stealing pills from her job at a local hospital to sell. Meanwhile, David began a relationship with a girl named Carly Scher, who frequently visited and sometimes stayed for long periods, which annoyed Jamie. Additionally, David also befriends a young man named Jason. Then, he invited Jason to move in with them, which upset Jamie. She didn't like Jason, so she treated him badly. She felt uncomfortable in her own home, and her relationship with David became increasingly strained. They argued frequently, and many of the arguments stemmed from David bringing Jason to live with them. The noise from David's parties even led neighbors to call the police on occasion. Whenever Jamie tried to address the situation, David reacted with anger and threatened violence. Over time, Jamie fell into depression. Her father, Arthur, who she often spoke with on the phone, noticed something was off with her, although she never shared the details of her troubled relationship with David. But Arthur could see she having problems. However, even if she had confided in Arthur, it likely wouldn't have changed anything, as their family viewed David as a kind and caring person. Jamie visited her friends and shared her feelings of fear and sadness. She confided that she was afraid of her half-brother David, particularly because of his violent behavior, and she lived in constant worry that he might attack her at night. On July 5, 2016, David stole a forklift from a construction site and used it to take equipment from there. After committing the theft, he set the vehicle on fire to cover his tracks. He was not alone. His accomplice, Carly, was with him. Additionally, he had taken over Jamie's house without her consent. He wanted to make changes that she did not approve of, leading to more arguments between them. During one heated argument, David violently struck Jamie, hitting her in the face and stomach, and demanded that she leave. Jason, a friend of David's who was present, did nothing to intervene and simply watched. Jamie left and spent the night at a friend's house. Afterward, he told Jason that Jamie was a burden and suggested that he should kill her. The next day, she returns home, which makes he feel even more disgusted, as he assumes he is the owner of the house. On June 9, 2016, Jamie spent the day at her father Arthur's house. Then, she returning home, she planned to pack her belongings and leave for good. However, when she got home, she found her brother David with Carly. As soon as Carly saw Carly left the house, leaving her and he at home together. He, still angry, confronted which led to a heated argument. The situation became tense and led to a fight, as a result of which he overpowered and killed her. To dispose of Jamie's body, David dismembered it. Afterward, he attempted to burn some of the body parts on a spit in the backyard, which caught Carly's attention. She noticed him with a lit fire, which was unusual since he typically didn't cook outside. When she asked him about it, he said that before Jamie left, Jamie lit a fire. A few days later, David stole a car, packed a suitcase, and drove 20 minutes north to Snohomish. He then abandoned the suitcase containing Jamie's dismembered remains by the side of the road. As days went by without any news of Jamie, his daughter, Arthur grew increasingly worried, especially when David drove to his house to ask if he had heard anything about Jamie. It was unusual for she to go missing like this, which made Arthur suspect that something was wrong. He decided to reach out to some of Jamie's friends, but none of them had seen her or had any information. On June 17, 2016, Arthur went to Jamie's house, but she was not there either. In his desperation, he called over a police officer and reported his youngest daughter, Jamie, as missing. Almost a week after the crime occurred, David sent a message to Stephanie from an unknown number, pretending to be Jamie. His intention was to prevent her family from worrying, but this plan did not work well. Meanwhile, the police were already investigating and looking into bank transactions. They were suspicious because there hadn't been any activity taking place on Jamie's bank account or credit card. Meanwhile, Arthur focused on seeking help through social media, hoping someone would provide information about his daughter's whereabouts. 1 month after Jamie went missing, early in the morning, investigators went to David's home to execute a search warrant. This area quickly had many police officers appearing. David and Jason were questioned, but investigators found nothing suspicious about their statements or actions. Many witnesses were interviewed, and they all confirmed that Jamie and David had a troubled relationship. Additionally, their house is often active at night, which causes more concern. For hours, investigators searched the backyard hoping to find clues, but they found nothing. For Arthur, it was a relief that no body was discovered in the yard. He and the other family members still held hope that Jamie was alive. Meanwhile, David pretended to be concerned and helped with the search. However, Jamie's case was not the only one the police were investigating. In September, the investigation into a burned forklift led authorities to identify David as the prime suspect. During questioning, agents uncovered digital photographs of stolen items, including a refrigerator and a stove, which matched the model numbers of appliances stolen from a trailer. Carly was interrogated by the police, and she revealed that David had confessed to her about the arson. Jason also confirmed to the agents that he saw David bringing the stolen appliances to his home. This information made David's situation much more complicated. He ultimately had no choice but to admit his guilt, leading to his arrest. David was then sentenced to 10 years and 2 months in prison for arson and second-degree burglary. A year after Jamie went missing, police received an anonymous tip suggesting they search around Jamie's house again. Investigators believed someone must have information about the case, so they quickly followed up on the tip. However, after digging for most of the day, they found nothing. Months passed, and nearly 2 years since Jamie went missing, when a public works crew in Snohomish County found a suitcase while picking up trash along the road. Inside the suitcase, wrapped in a red blanket, is the remains of a person. The workers immediately reported their discovery to the authorities. Detectives quickly determined that the person in the suitcase had been murdered. However, due to the advanced decomposition, it was challenging to identify the victim or confirm gender. The forensic team sent samples for lab testing, and after 2 months, it was confirmed that the remains belonged to Jamie Haggard. Evidence pointed to David as the main suspect. GPS data from a stolen car showed that he had driven near the location where Jamie's remains were found. Additionally, police discovered that the blanket used to wrap the remains belonged to Jason and had been stolen by David in an attempt to frame Jason. As a result, David was charged with murder. On Monday, October 28, 2019, David Haggard was charged with second-degree murder. The following day, a jury found him guilty, and his bail was set at $2 million. On Friday, December 5, 2019, David appeared in a King County courtroom for his sentencing hearing. Prosecutors asked for the maximum sentence of 22 years in prison. Meanwhile, the defense argued that the sentence should be lighter, stressing that David should not be punished so harshly. Throughout the trial, David maintained his innocence and claimed he was not the one who committed the crime. He criticized the justice system for punishing innocent people and expressed his love for his younger sister Jamie. He insisting he could never harm her. When Stephanie spoke emotionally about her sister Jamie in court, David broke down in tears. The senior assistant prosecutor said that David had put Jamie's family, which was also his family, through pain for nearly 2 years by keeping the truth about her death from them. Ultimately, David was sentenced to 15 years in prison, followed by 3 years of community supervision, during which he would receive evaluation and treatment for his addictions. During this time, Jamie's children, Dylan and Madison Rose, mistakenly believe that their mother's absence is due to their father, Jake, not allowing them to contact her. Fortunately, Jake remarried, and his new wife adopted the girls, Dylan Va Madison, raising them as her own. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Larry Holman. A small town, Festus, Missouri, USA, with a population of about 10,000, is a religious community. Almost all the local residents are people of faith, very calm and friendly people. It is a quiet place where everyone knows each other very well and keeps in touch. However, sometimes it is in such quiet towns that serious crimes occur. On November 21, 2000, the local police department received a call from a witness. She reported hearing gunshots near a factory and saw a suspicious vehicle, but she was too afraid to approach it. She believed that the man in the vehicle was injured. The police quickly went to the reported location. A few hundred meters away, they spotted a pickup truck in a field. From a distance, it looked like the truck had a problem because the hazard lights were flashing. As the officers got closer, they noticed the windshield was broken and a man slumped over the wheel. He showed no signs of life, and his foot was still on the brake pedal. On the floor, there was an unfinished soda can, which likely fell out of the man's hand after he was murdered. There was a large hole in his skull from a bullet that had penetrated and even broken the windshield. It appeared that the murder had occurred just minutes earlier, as the blood was still fresh and running down the floor of the truck. The officers quickly checked and found the victim's face was severely disfigured. Police officer Randy, who arrived at the scene of the crime. Randy said he had worked with the victim before, and the victim was Larry Holman. He also knew Larry's wife, Tammy, and their 2 children. When Randy called, he did not tell Tammy that her husband was dead, so she initially thought Larry was just injured and had come to the scene. When she realized he was dead, she collapsed with grief and began to cry. Larry and Tammy met at church. Although she was much younger, Larry fell deeply in love with her and pursued her. At the time, Tammy was 16 years old, and Larry was 28. He was divorced and had a daughter from a previous marriage. After Tammy graduated from college, their romantic relationship began. Friends and family described their relationship as genuine and loving. Larry's co-workers noted that he even kept a picture of his wife in his lunchbox so he could see her whenever he took a break from work. They married and had 2 children, Josh and Natalie. And their family was very religious. Larry was known to be a kind person. He had no criminal record or connections to the criminal world, making it unclear who might want to harm him. An analysis of the car was conducted, and the bullet's trajectory was reconstructed. It was determined that the shot was fired from a significant distance using a powerful cartridge. The bullet entered through the rear side window, traveled diagonally through the headrest, and struck Larry in the back of the head. After sustaining the head injury, Larry's leg remained on the brake pedal, causing the car to stop. Severe injuries cause immediate death. It was assumed that an unfortunate hunter had done it by accident. However, further investigation revealed that the shot did not come from the woods, raising questions about the vehicle's movement. Although the braking distance was determined, it was unclear whether Larry stopped before or after he was injured. Additionally, the first officers on the scene noted that the car's headlights were off, suggesting that the vehicle could not have been moving when the injury occurred. They later confirmed that Larry may have parked near the factory, and the murder was intentional. Officer Randy believed that Larry was the target of a planned attack, but the other officers were not supportive of the idea because the area was safe and had never had a similar incident before. In fact, there had been no murders in decades, making it hard to believe that anyone would harm a good man like Larry. The investigation began by interviewing everyone who knew the Larrys, starting with neighbors and relatives. The neighbor who lived across the street from Larry said he had seen Larry at church just before the murders, and that they had both attended church services. The neighbor had heard that Larry was going through a hard time and had quit his job. The neighbor noticed that Larry seemed nervous, but Larry brushed off any concerns with jokes. The neighbor reported an incident when he and Larry were hunting in the woods. At some point, Larry and the neighbor became separated in the woods. Moments later, Larry called his neighbor and reported that he was injured and gave his coordinates. The neighbor quickly ran to help him. As he walked through the woods, he noticed a stranger wearing camouflage walking in the opposite direction. In Missouri, hunters are required to wear camouflage when hunting with a firearm, so this did not seem unusual. When the neighbor found Larry, he discovered that Larry was okay, as the bullet only grazed his head by a few inches. The neighbor concluded that the hunter was inexperienced and did not know how to use a gun properly. Larry later said he did not see the shooter, suggesting that the shooting may have been accidental. There were many people out hunting at the time. It is not uncommon for a hunter to mistakenly identify another person as prey, resulting in injury or even death each year. However, Randy believes the shooting was not an accident. Unfortunately, Larry's neighbor was unable to provide a detailed description of the hunter he encountered. Police then interviewed the woman, named Helen, who called the police to report the incident. Police spoke to her to see if she had noticed anything unusual on the day of the murder. According to Helene, just before she called the police, a car had pulled up near her house. A man got out, dressed in camouflage, pulled out a large shotgun, and walked along the railroad tracks toward the woods. He did not cross the tracks, however, which was odd, since hunters usually walk straight into the woods. Helen said that she had no idea what had happened afterward. Police investigated Larry's background in the hope of finding clues to the killer. However, they discovered that he was a calm man with no criminal record and a devoted husband. He had worked at the factory for many years, but had recently decided to quit and was looking for work. Everyone who knew Larry described him as a good person who would never be involved in any crime. The community was small and tight-knit, which added to their concerns. The motive behind the crime is unclear, leaving locals fearing that a madman may have committed the crime and is on the loose. Public pressure mounted on the police to quickly apprehend the suspect. Meanwhile, rumors began to spread throughout the city. Many of the rumors cast a negative light on Larry's wife, Tammy. They said she was too young for Larry. They pointed out that she wore revealing clothes behind her husband's back and frequently visited nightclubs and bars while he was at work. Strange cars were also seen near her home at night. However, there were reports that Tammy spent time with her children and seemed to be a good wife. But rumors began to spread that she was cheating on her husband and that her lovers were visiting her frequently. Therefore, all the young people who visited Tammy while Larry was away became suspects. If she was indeed unfaithful, any of her lovers could have had a motive for the attack. A neighbor gave the police important information. She said that her children were playing with Tammy's children. A few days after Larry's death, when she went to pick up the children, she noticed a strange man in the house. He acted as if he were the host. The neighbor found the man's behavior very unusual, especially since Larry had just passed away. When the neighbor questioned, Tammy explained that the man was just an old school friend who wanted to support her during this difficult time. This attracted the attention of the police, and they decided to identify him. The police discovered that the man was Tim Smith. The police discovered that Tim had moved in with Tammy the day after Larry died. He quickly took over Larry's space and used his belongings without hesitation. It was clear that Larry's children were unhappy with the situation and did not like having strangers in their home. The police decided to look into Tim's criminal history, suspecting that he might have had a motive for committing the crime. Surprisingly, the police did not find any serious issues on his record. The most serious offenses on his record were a few traffic violations. Tim and Tammy were high school classmates and dated for a while, but they broke up after graduation. However, it seemed unusual that Tim would quickly go from former classmates to roommates living in Tammy's house. Tim was then brought to the police station for questioning. At the police station, Tim denied any involvement in Larry's death, but claimed that he had moved in with Tammy shortly after her husband's death. He claimed that before that, he had only visited occasionally and slept over a few times. At the beginning of the questioning, he claimed to be Tammy's boyfriend. Furthermore, he admitted that he had been her lover for a long time. Tammy had never been faithful to Larry and had had several affairs. She had planned to leave her husband to marry Tim. Witnesses reported that Tammy acted strangely after Larry died. At the funeral, she wore a revealing outfit and seemed nonchalant throughout the funeral. She seemed cheerful and spent a lot of time on the phone. One of Larry's sisters heard that during these calls, Tammy was talking to other men. Rumors began to spread that Tammy was not only having affairs with Tim Smith, but with many others. A witness reported that Tammy was sunbathing in a revealing bikini in front of her house. He stopped to say hello and compliment her, leading to a relationship. But he was much younger than Tammy, and their relationship quickly ended. However, police investigated and found a third man, Charlie Miller, who was often mentioned. According to Larry's eldest son from his first marriage, Charlie worked at a nearby grocery store. After dropping her daughter and son off at school, Tammy would go to the park to meet Charlie, where they spent many hours together. Several of Charlie's friends confirmed that Charlie had a romantic relationship with Tammy. They first met when Charlie worked as a contractor for Larry. Charlie was married at the time and had a close friendship with Larry. While working on renovations at Larry's house, Charlie met Tammy, who was very flirtatious. Their teasing soon turned into a more intimate relationship while Larry was away. Tammy eventually told her husband about the affair. However, he chose not to divorce her and instead tried to save their marriage. He asked Charlie to end his relationship with Tammy. The number of suspects continued to grow. Even if Tammy did not directly kill her husband, she could still be considered the mastermind of the crime. She had been having affairs with multiple people, and each had a motive for the murder. Police discovered text messages on Tammy's phone that showed she was having affairs with Tim Smith and Charlie Miller at the same time. To investigate further, police questioned Tammy. She revealed that shortly before Larry died, Tom Rumble had started stalking her. She provided evidence through messages he sent her on a messaging app. She described him as a dangerous man. Just before Larry died, Tom began writing letters to Tammy. He expressed his love for her, his desire to have children, and his willingness to marry her. However, Tammy felt uncomfortable and tried to distance herself from him because of his obsessive behavior. She suspected that he might be involved in her husband's murder. Tammy provided the police with evidence of their correspondence. Even though her husband had died and she was in a relationship with Tim Smith, Tom's harassment continued. Tammy felt trapped and didn't know how to get Tom to stop. By the time the police were notified, Tom was still sending Tammy letters that she wasn't responding to. In fact, she had sought a restraining order against him in court. When the police spoke to Tom, he claimed to have genuine feelings for Tammy, but dismissed her request for a restraining order as an overreaction. He didn't consider himself a threat. He said that he had only come to give her a bouquet of flowers that day and did not want to scare Tammy. However, his behavior was quite suspicious, and he accidentally revealed that he had been to Larry's house many times, as he knew the layout of the house very well. This suggested that he had visited Tammy while her husband was away. After the autopsy, the medical examiner confirmed that Larry had been killed with a large caliber gun, specifically a .243 caliber rifle, which is the standard deer hunting rifle, and a correspondingly weighted bullet was used. As police continued their investigation, they discovered that shortly before the murder, Charlie, who was working as a contractor at the time, had talked to Larry about hunting. During a subsequent visit, Charlie showed Larry his .243 caliber rifle. Police specifically noted that Larry was killed with a .243 caliber rifle, which was associated with Charlie Miller. Additionally, an anonymous informant told police that Tammy's boyfriend owned a .243 caliber rifle. Charlie's gun was taken for testing. Fortunately, the police found a bullet near Larry's car that matched the gun. In Larry's death, a love triangle was involved. The police learned that Charlie and Larry had been close friends for a long time. Police suspected Charlie of the murder because he owned a car that matched the description of a woman who lived near the railroad tracks. Although she did not speak directly to the driver, she saw him clearly. When shown a photo, she was able to identify Charlie. After examining Charlie's weapon, the police confirmed that Larry had been killed with Charlie's rifle. On January 9, 2001, the police went to Charlie's house to arrest him and inform him of his rights. Charlie later confessed to killing Larry. He was arrested and taken to the police station. Tim Smith and Tom Rumble were cleared of any involvement in the murder. After his arrest, he testified that he drove to the house where Tammy lived near the railroad tracks, got his rifle and wore camouflage that day. He then walked along the tracks, retracing the route he had taken through the woods and fields that morning. The only question that remains is how did he know where Larry would be at that time? Charlie confessed that Tammy had been urging him to take action. She expressed her suffering due to her husband's cruelty, and Charlie felt compelled to rescue her from this oppressive situation. This was not the first time Charlie had targeted Larry. During a hunting trip in the forest, he had previously fired a shot that narrowly missed Larry's head. It was evident that this was intentional, as Tammy had informed Charlie about her husband's whereabouts, making it easy for him to find Larry in the woods. After this initial attempt, Tammy spoke with Charlie, who tried to convince her to leave Larry and be with him instead. Despite this conversation, she continued to provoke Charlie, believing that a second attempt on Larry's life would succeed. especially with Larry's upcoming marriage putting pressure on Charlie, who was also a close friend of Larry. Why didn't Tammy divorce her husband if she wasn't happy in her marriage? The answer is simple. She and Charlie didn't want a divorce because they wanted to avoid dividing assets and child custody. Additionally, they were motivated by the prospect of benefiting from Larry's life insurance policy. Just before these events, Larry had purchased $1 million insurance policy. Tammy saw this as a great opportunity, but then she found out that it wasn't a life insurance policy, but an employer protection policy. Therefore, Tammy could only claim $150,000. Now that Tammy is under interrogation, she firmly maintains that she did not kill her husband and had nothing to do with his death. She begins to blame Charlie for everything, believing that her lover had developed strong feelings for her due to their brief relationship. She believes that Charlie sees Larry as the only obstacle to their happiness, so he decides to get rid of Larry. Charlie had a clear motive for the murder. During his trial, Charlie Miller, 49, pleaded guilty again to the murder. He argued that he was in emotional distress and was on medication at the time of the crime, which affected his understanding of his actions. As part of a plea agreement, Charlie was sentenced to 25 years in prison and is scheduled to be released in 2028. Throughout the trial, Tammy denied any involvement in the crimes. Her attorney continued to support her testimony. The prosecutor's office presented evidence, including numerous phone calls and text messages involving Charlie. Based on this evidence, it was shown that Tammy was a deceitful and cunning criminal who manipulated multiple men at once. The prosecution presented indirect evidence of her involvement through various telephone conversations that took place on the day of the murder. She was in frequent contact with Charlie, who also implicating her while discussing the execution of the order. However, the prosecutor's chances of winning at trial were uncertain. As a result, the prosecution proposed a deal to Tammy. 30-year-old Tammy Holman was sentenced to 7 years in prison, but she maintained her innocence, claiming that her confession was coerced. In 2009, she was released and returned to Festus. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Orsolya Gal. Orsolya Gal had lived in Forest Hills for over 10 years. She is originally from Hungary and met her future husband, Howard, at a Christmas party in Budapest in 1994. At that time, she was 20 years old and had just graduated from business school, while Howard was about to complete his master's degree. They exchanged love letters for several weeks, then taking a vacation together in Thailand. After returning to New York to continue his studies, he invited she to visit him, and they have been together ever since. He founded a consulting firm and was very successful. Meanwhile, she worked in Manhattan for many years, eventually putting her career on hold to have and raise her 2 sons, Jamie and Leo. On August 2, 2012, the family moved into a 5-bedroom home. They lived happily together, and friends described Orsolya as outgoing and friendly. People say she is always smiling, loves to joke, and is willing to chat about any topic. She loved to travel, and her Facebook profile showcased photos from family trips to Paris, China, and Tokyo. However, her greatest happiness is her sons, whom she cared for deeply and was very attentive. On the morning of April 16, 2022, Glenn Van Nostrade was walking his dog around 8:00 a.m. At this time, he saw a large cloth bag lying among a pile of trash near the sidewalk, on the grass near the corner of Venu Subway and Jackie Robinson Avenue. While he often encountered litter on that busy road, something about this bag felt off. As he approached, his dog became agitated and tense. Only when he stood near the bag he noticed the reason. Blood was seeping out and running down the concrete sidewalk. Initially, Glenn suspected the bag contained an animal carcass. He nudged it with his foot and found it surprisingly heavy. Curious, he bent down to unzip the bag. Then he saw a pair of pale bare legs inside. He tried to make sense of what he was seeing. At first he thought they were the legs of a mannequin, because the skin looked stiff and unnatural. However, when he unzipped the bag further, he realized that the legs were covered by black jeans, a belt, and part of a woman's waist. Glenn found the woman curled up in a fetal position, her head bowed. He called 911 at 8:02 a.m., deeply disturbed by his discovery. He believed the victim might have been a teenage girl, based on her physique. Immediately after that, the police arrived. They quickly blocked the area around the crime scene. At this time, Glenn decided to use his dog to search the nearby area. While crossing the subway avenue, he noticed a trail of blood and alerted the police. This bloody trail, which extended for half a mile from the location of the bag, ultimately led the investigators to a $2 million house on Juno Street. A team of police stormed that house. During a quick search, they discovered blood on the first floor and in the basement, as well as a bloody knife on the third floor. In a bedroom, they found Leo Klein lying in bed. He said he lived in the house with his parents, Orsolia and Howard. He also said that his brother Jamie was away. After questioning, the police determined that Leo knew nothing about the situation, so they released him into the care of a relative. Meanwhile, the police identified the body found in a bag. It was Orsolia, Leo's mother, who was 51 years old. A forensic examination revealed that she had her throat cut and suffered 58 stab wounds to her torso, neck, and arms. There were also injuries on her palms and fingers, indicating a struggle. Forensic expert Miles said that the crime was very brutal, and the fact that the body was carelessly disposed of showed that this was an act driven by emotion. The extreme violence of the attack indicated that the murderer was likely someone known to Orsolia, rather than a stranger. This led investigators to suspect that the perpetrator could be the husband, a child, or even a lover. The youngest son, Leo, has been eliminated as a suspect. Jamie, the eldest son, and Howard, the husband, were both out of town on the day of Orsolia's death, but they were still being questioned. The identity of the mystery man who dumped the bag remains unknown. The investigation has caused anxiety in Forest Hills following Orsolia's sad death. Neighbors were deeply moved by the tragedy. Those familiar with Orsolia and her family brought flowers and offered their condolences. The shocking death has raised more questions than answers, leaving the motive for the crime a mystery, as police continue to hunt for the suspect. When the police informed the media that Howard and Jamie were important people, the public's attention quickly turned to Jamie. On the morning of Friday, April 15, Orsolia was reportedly looking at potential colleges for Jamie. Howard tweeted that he arrived in Portland at 1:36 a.m. on April 16. He later posted another status, which has since been deleted, announcing that he would be returning home to New York soon. The change appears to have come after Howard received a heartbreaking text message from Orsolia earlier that morning. The message said, "He's back. Don't call the police, or he'll kill the Howard family." Shortly thereafter, Howard was contacted by police and informed that the body of his wife, Orsolia, had been found. He worried about his family's safety and faced scrutiny from reporters and social analysts. They said that his Twitter posts seemed like a way to create an alibi. The message from Orsolia's phone seems like a fictional threat from a movie, making one wonder why a killer would waste time sending such a message after committing the crime. Additionally, there were no signs of forced entry into the house. It appears that Orsolia knew the killer, or that he used a spare key to enter the house. Police are examining phone calls, surveillance camera videos, and receipts from places Orsolia visited to reconstruct her journey before her death. On Friday, April 16, 2022, she planned to go to Manhattan that evening to see an opera at Lincoln Center with friends. However, when checking her phone, the truth was completely different. On the night of her murder, she had been in contact with 3 different men. One of them will accompany her to Lincoln Center. All 3 men are currently under investigation. That night, Orsolya returned home alone by train and stopped by a bar at Forest Hills train station. This is where she often comes to have a drink or a snack after going out. She spoke with the manager, whom she knew well. Police believe Orsolya entered her home at 2:40 a.m., around the same time her attacker gained entry. At 4:30 a.m., he carried her body out using her son's hockey bag. A note found on the refrigerator read, "Find a new handyman." On the night of the murder, Orsolya had spoken with 3 men, one of whom was David Bonola, a 40-years-old handyman who had been working in their home for the past 2 years. He specialized in heating and ventilation. He is married with 2 children. However, 21 years ago he illegally immigrated to the United States from Mexico. By the time of Orsolya's death, he had become estranged from his family and was living in an apartment in nearby Richmond Hill. Neighbors described he as a night owl who often played guitar or rode his bike after dark, frequently stopping at a local cafe for food. The police discovered that David had a close relationship with Orsolya, as they often communicated over the phone. He frequently left comments and heart emojis on her Facebook photos, often calling her the most beautiful woman. According to the owner of a store across the street from his apartment, he would come in every evening to buy a red rose and even showed the owner a photo of Orsolya, expressing his love for her. The police were aware that she had been in contact with he in early April 2022, just weeks before her murder. The authorities then decided to secretly follow him to look for new clues. 21-years-old Olivia Kolinsky had been a barista at a cafe for 3 years, where David was a frequent visitor. Olivia described him as strange and somewhat creepy, noting that he often stalked people. He frequented the cafe multiple times a week, watching the waitresses and baristas closely, making comments about their looks. He also left affectionate notes in the tip jar. He even proposed to 2 of the employees. The cafe staff called the police several times, but he always managed to leave before they arrived. David's passion for YouTube clearly shows his thoughts and desires, mainly revolving around 2 themes, seduction and violence. He has created a YouTube playlist with many videos related to local crime. The playlist also includes many videos about intimacy and women, offering tips on attraction and seduction. One playlist has over 200 videos, all aimed at helping viewers develop their ability to attract women. It is worth noting that he is a man with a rich imagination and a penchant for violence. Then, surveillance cameras captured images of David walking near his apartment with a homemade white bandage on his left arm. That day, he visited a city doctor for treatment of cuts on his hands. However, he was referred to the hospital because the cuts were too deep. The police postponed cleaning up the trash at the crime scene for several days to conduct a special search, because they believe this pile of trash may contain evidence that help convict him. Among the discarded objects in the trash pile, they found blood-soaked brown boots, believed to belong to David, which were worn when he stabbed Orsolya nearly 60 times, along with a bloody t-shirt and bloody bandages. On Wednesday, April 19, 2024, detectives returned to the area to locate David, who had noticed he was being followed. David approached a patrol car and said he heard they were looking for him. The police then took him to the station, and there he admitted his involvement in Orsolya's murder. After a brief pause to eat a croissant, he repeated his confession for the video recording. During the prosecution, David explained that he and Orsolya had an on-again, off-again relationship for 2 years. Recently, she had ended their relationship again. On the morning of April 16, he went to her house to try to reconcile. However, their argument became so violent and loud that they had to go down to the basement to avoid waking her son, Leo. The argument became more heated, making David very angry. In a fit of anger, he grabbed a knife and cut her throat, stabbing her multiple times. To prevent Leo from discovering the body, he placed it in the boy's hockey bag and discarded it in a nearby forest park. David admitted that he sent a threatening message to her husband, Howard, in which he stated he would kill the rest of the family. However, his testimony contained several inconsistencies, particularly regarding his possession of a knife from Orsolia's kitchen during the fight in the basement. The next day, he changed his confession. He explained that he had gone to her house after learning that she had given him HIV and a sexually transmitted disease she had contracted from other men. He claimed that he knew she had received a call from another man and was planning to meet that man, which he could not accept. He also reported that during the altercation, she took a knife and forced him to leave the house, threatening to kill him. At that moment, he seized the knife from her and harmed her. On April 20, David Bonola was arrested and charged with second-degree murder, first-degree criminal trespass, and fourth-degree criminal possession of a weapon. Despite confessing to the crime twice, he pleaded not guilty. If found guilty, he could face a sentence ranging from 25 years to life in prison. District Attorney Melinda Catt announced that a serious crime had occurred, leaving two teenagers, Leo and Jamie, without their mother. This incident has also created fear in the community. David Bonola was sentenced to 25 years in prison in November 2022 after pleading guilty to manslaughter in the killing of Orsolia Gall in Queens, New York. After his prison term, he will be required to serve 5 years of probation. Many believe Orsolia shares some responsibility for her tragic death, stemming from her infidelity. At the memorial service, Jamie, the eldest son of she, spoke for himself and his younger brother, Leo. He expressed that when he thinks of his mother, he remembers the hard work and dedication she put into them. He said she wanted her children to be happy, and her happiness was their happiness. He stressed that they would always remember this. Welcome back to our channel. Today we will explore a new case, the case of Teed family. What was supposed to be a peaceful holiday turned into a terrible nightmare, leaving the survivors with scars that would never heal. When the Teed family set out for their remote house to celebrate Christmas, they had no idea that their trip would lead them into a tragedy few could have imagined. So, what happened to them? Join me as we explore the story of today's case. Rolf Tita was born in Germany. When he was just 11 years old, he and his mother moved to the United States. Shortly after their arrival, his mother remarried and chose to begin a new life following her first unsuccessful marriage. Rolf was a quiet boy who excelled in his studies. When he started college, he met Kay. They were both studying similar subjects and shared similar life views. Like Rolf, Kay was calm and sociable, and she dreamed of building her American dream and starting a family with someone who shared her values. Rolf quickly seemed like the perfect match for her. They had so much in common that after their first meeting, they became inseparable. At this point, Rolf was just over 20 years old. Both of them had serious intentions for their future, and their parents supported their relationship, which was progressing well. The two of them decided to move to a new home and began a journey across the country. They first lived in Nevada, then in Utah, but this was just the start. As they traveled to various locations, Rolf and Kay enjoyed their time together and eventually chose to get married. Shortly after, they started planning their next move, looking for a larger house and considering starting a family. In 1963, the young couple moved to the small town of Humble, Texas, which had a population of around 10,000. They were dedicated members of the Christian church, loved children, and aspired to have a large family. They quickly became part of the local community and earned the respect of those around them. Unfortunately, the Tied couple faced challenges that prevented them from having children for many years. However, they found a solution. They decided to adopt. After adopting their second child, Kay was surprised to find out that she was pregnant again, which they viewed as a miracle. The pregnancy was so subtle that she didn't even realize it. She later gave birth to a healthy daughter named Trish. The family enjoyed a fulfilling life and happy, having everything they needed to cherish their time together. Rolf excelled in trading and had dreamed of starting his own business since his student days. By the time their children were born, he was earning a good income, which allowed Kay to stay home and focus on raising the children. Thanks to his hard work and entrepreneurial spirit, Rolf opened a company in 1969 that quickly became part of the Houston retail market. With their financial stability, they eventually purchased a house in Utah, a small town with just over 500 residents in the 1990s. The mountainous area felt peaceful and secluded. They found a beautiful house perched high in the mountains, and it was considered very safe, much quieter than the nearby towns. The locals were well acquainted with one another, and their family seamlessly integrated into this community. The house was located about 4 kilometers from the nearest road. A beautiful river flowed nearby, with trees lining both banks. Despite the transportation challenges, especially in winter, their family made it a tradition to spend the entire Christmas holiday there every year. To reach the house, they would leave their car in a parking lot near the road and use snowmobiles to travel up into the mountains, as this was the quickest way to get there. By December 1990, their family's routine had not changed. They planned to return to their forest house for the Christmas holidays. On December 20th, Kay and her son, Sean, flew from Texas to Oakley, where her sister Claudia Tidwell Nelson picked her up. Claudia drove her so they could wait together for the others. Rolf, Line, and Trish were scheduled to arrive the following evening, December 21st. Typically, Rolf wrapped up his work before the vacation, while Kay visited her sister Claudia to help organize the gathering and prepare food and supplies for their trip to the mountains. At the usual spot where they parked their cars to switched modes of transportation, Kay and Claudia noticed a young man who looked suspicious. Even though it was freezing outside, he was wearing light shoes and a thin shirt, which was quite odd. They offered to assist him, but he didn't respond and instead walked faster, quickly disappearing from view. They reached their house just before sunset and had dinner. Claudia chose to stay overnight. In the morning, she saw a figure outside the window. Claudia and Kay searched for any signs outside but found nothing. It appeared that someone had used their paths without being seen. Ultimately, they chose to focus on getting ready for the busy weekend ahead. On December 21st, by the time Rolf and his daughters arrived, everything is almost ready. Kay shared details about recent events, including a suspicious person she had encountered while with Claudia. She felt particularly uneasy about this stranger, who seemed to belong to the area. Kay suggested that Rolf take hunting rifles and transport them to the house on a snowmobile, just in case something unexpected occurred. However, Rolf declined, believing there was no need for such precautions. He felt confident that everything would be fine and thought that carrying weapons in everyday life was too dangerous. In fact, Rolf lacked experience with rifles and pistols. He mentioned that this area has been the safest in the last 100 years. In the suburbs, there has only been one incident, which was not even related to gunfire. Despite some aggressive driving and poor behavior on the roads, there have only been a few robberies over several decades. Unfortunately, he was unaware of how dangerous some people in the area had become. Kay expressed that something was off, so she decided to take precautions. She grabbed a couple of rifles and loaded them onto the snowmobile, saying it would make her feel safer. Her husband did not object. An adult among the teenagers helped move their belongings into the house. Claudia left in the morning to buy supplies she had forgotten for the upcoming holiday. Kay and Rolf decorated their home and prepared for a celebration. Because they lacked some necessities, they decided to go to the city to buy more. At this time, Sean, feeling overwhelmed by the busyness, asked to stay the night with his Aunt Claudia, which likely helped him relax. After dropping Sean off, their family visited Kay's mother, Beth. At that time, she was 72 years old, had poor eyesight, and was partially paralyzed due to a car accident earlier that year. Kay and her family visited her regularly and often took her to their home. This visit was no different. They spent the evening talking and enjoying each other's company, preparing to leave for the mountains the next day. On December 2nd, around noon, Teed family went to town. It was a particularly frosty day. The group then split up. Rolf and Trish planned to return to the cabin, while Kay, Linny, and Beth walked towards their house in the mountains. The two groups ended up about 2 hours apart. Kay and Linny arrived at their destination first and intended to set up a chair. While stopping near the garage, Linny noticed a dark figure in the main bedroom. Mistaking it for her cousin David, she didn't think much of it. Linny ran in, immediately turned on the hot water to warm her hands, and with her peripheral vision, she saw a dark figure hiding behind the refrigerator. Thinking it was just David, trying to scare her, she laughed to herself. However, when the figure stepped into the light, she realized it wasn't David at all. It was a young man with curly hair, he pointing a gun at her. She attempted to alert the others, but they had already noticed the armed intruder. Kay felt powerless against the intruder, regretted not grabbing a gun from the garage. He commanded Linny to help her grandmother and mother go upstairs. Beth, with her daughter and granddaughter, struggled to ascend to the second floor, worried that the intruder might start attacking if they didn't hurry. Another man wearing glasses appeared, also holding a weapon. Kay panicked, pleaded for their lives, promising to give anything. Without hesitation, the stranger man with curly hair attacked her by force. She fell to the ground, screaming in pain. The assailant attacked her several more times. Then, he aimed the gun at Beth and also attacked by force her in the face. Surprisingly, Beth did not die. She collapsed but quickly tried to get back up. The thug attacked her again multiple times. He confused about needing to use so many bullets, while another man seemed to enjoy the chaos. Linny prepared for her own fate, but unexpectedly, she was taken to the bedroom. The intruders gagged her with a dirty sock and tied her hands and feet. One of the two strangers brought a dog and handed over for Linny, claiming it would calm her down. They left her and returned to their shot victims. Gang leader continues to attack Kay and Beth, then took all the jewelry from the dead and emptied their pockets of valuables. They dragged the bodies outside, leaving them in front of Linny. She had just witnessed her grandmother and mother die. Simultaneously, she realized her father and younger sister would be home soon. She was in danger herself and wanted to warn them, but there was no time. At 2:45 p.m., Rolf and Trish rode snowmobiles back to the house. Sean still lives with Claudia. Meanwhile, the killers were waiting for new victims, and one of them held a weapon to Linny's head, threatening to kill her if she made a sound. When Rolf entered the house, he saw Linny being used as a human shield by an armed man who had a weapon pressed to her head. The strangers confronted Rolf and the rest in the living room. The newcomers immediately noticed the bodies of their loved ones and wanted to help, but the attackers prevented them from doing so. In a desperate attempt, Rolf began emptying his pockets, giving the criminals cash and his expensive watch. However, the leader ordered his partner to attack Rolf. The second attacker hesitated, clearly reluctant to get involved. Finally, the leader aimed his pistol and pulled the trigger, but it only clicked. He tried again, and still nothing happened. The third time, he succeeded in attacking Rolf. Trish panicked to see her father collapse to the floor, bleeding. The attackers then searched Trish's bag, but did nothing to her. Instead of escalating the violence, the criminals took Linny and Trish to a bedroom, then locked them inside. They found canisters of gasoline stored in the house for snowmobiles, and began pouring it everywhere. They chatted casually, unwrapped Teed family's gifts, and filmed their antics with a camera they found in the home. They even enjoyed a festive meal prepared by Kay. It seemed they had planned to destroy all evidence of their presence, and they acted nonchalantly. They then returned to Rolf. The leader attacked him in the back of the head again, and subsequently poured gasoline over his body as well. The criminals ordered Trish and Linny to load all the stolen items onto snowmobiles, which were in the garage. They didn't use gasoline to set the garage on fire, as they needed it for their escape. A guy loaded his gun, unbuttoned his jacket, and revealed a knife. Linny noticed this, and he assured her. The criminals then set fire to the house and drove away with the two girls as hostages. While driving the snowmobiles, Trish and Linny considered their options for escaping. They thought about crashing into a tree or causing an accident to get rid of their captors, but they couldn't come up with a plan. During this time, their uncle, Randy Zorn, was driving his car to the Tide family home. He encountered the snowmobile-carrying criminals and waved to them, thinking they were familiar faces, possibly his nieces with their boyfriends. However, he was taken aback when they didn't respond to his greeting. Normally, Linny and Trish were respectful and would greet him back. The criminals didn't recognize Randy and simply drove past him. In the parking lot, the strangers transferred the girls into Tide family's car. It was the car Rolf brought the food to. They filled with fear that the experience of their death would be painful. With no other choice, they complied and took their seats in the back of the car. Randy also arrived in the parking lot and waved to them. However, Linny and Trish ignored him because they feared he might become the next target of the killers. The leader of the group noticed Randy and asking Linny if she knew him. She responded that she did not recognize the man. Right after that, the car carrying the hostages left the scene. A moment later, Randy saw a man coming. There was severe frost, but he was without a jacket, without shoes, and even without a hat. It seemed his face was literally torn apart, with drops of blood frozen on him and his face swollen. Randy recognized it was Rolf. Rolf told of the attack on his family. Remarkably, he survived and managed to escape to the parking lot in an effort. He said, the attackers broke into his house in the woods, doused it with gasoline, and set it on fire. The fire quickly spread, but Rolf pretended to be dead and waited until the chaos died down before taking action. He initially tried to put out the fire, but the fire spread quickly due to the gasoline, causing his jacket to catch fire. He ran into the bathroom, took it off and suffering only minor burns. Fortunately, the garage was not on fire. Driven by the desire to save his daughters, Rolf pursued the kidnappers for 4 kilometers, despite being injured and having impaired vision. He knew the route well enough to reach his destination, but he clearly needed urgent medical attention. Randy put him in the car and drove towards the city, but the medical center was too far away. Randy fears that there may not be enough time to save Rolf's life. He called emergency services, requesting the helicopter and reporting a fire. Meanwhile, the criminals with the hostages were heading towards the canyon. Suddenly, a patrol car passed by them. The police car quickly turned around and began to follow the criminals. The kidnappers ignored the officers' demands to stop and sped up to 150 km/h. With the bad weather and slippery roads, the situation was extremely dangerous. The criminals trying to escape from the police drove past a checkpoint. Several patrol cars joined the chase, and about half an hour later, the criminals got stuck on an embankment. They attempted to climb out to flee. Meanwhile, Linny and Trish seized the opportunity to escape, ran towards the police. When the hostages are safe, a brief shootout ensued. Linny pleaded with the police to handle the attackers who had killed her mother, father, and grandmother. The criminals surrendered immediately. Both were detained without sustaining injuries. Meanwhile, doctors arrived quickly by helicopter to take Rolf to the hospital. They fought to save his life. Despite being attacked in the face and then in the back of the head, Rolf miraculously survived the attack and remained conscious for most of it. He later recovered without experiencing severe consequences from his injuries. Right after that, firefighters fought the fire. The house did not burn down completely, but the property was seriously damaged. When the police arrived at the crime scene, they described it as the most terrible thing they had seen during their work. There was blood all around, with the bodies of the victims left inside the house, was a terrible smell of burnt corpses' flesh. Here they find cameras recording footage of the criminals holding the victims and laughing at them. Based on camera footage, the criminals were arrested, and they are only 25 years old. The killer himself, Von Taylor, had curly hair and was the instigator. Both guys had served time in the Utah State Prison before this crime. In there, Taylor for burglary and arson, while his partner, Edward Deli, had less serious charges. They met each other in a rehabilitation center where they were sent shortly before the end of their prison term. Here, they were prepared to start life from scratch without crime. However, instead, a cunning and bloody plan was born in the minds of the criminals. They escaped from the rehabilitation center instead of integrating into society. On December 14, the thugs hitchhiked to Oakley, where Taylor's father had his own house. There, they spent about a week planning the robbery. In fact, on the day of their arrival at Tidy's house, Kay saw a suspicious guy in the parking lot. Without outerwear, he was just examining the nearby houses in search of another target for robbery. Kay and Beth immediately attracted his attention. On December 22, the criminals broke into the house of the Tidy family when they left for the city. The attackers behaved like the owners, even having fun murders and thefts. They decided to use Trish and Linnae as human shields, planning to get to New York, then get rid of the hostages and disappear into the big city. On January 22, Taylor and Deli were officially charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, attempted first-degree murder, and 2 counts of aggravated kidnapping. In addition, there are other crimes including theft, arson, and resisting arrest, not to mention escaping from a correctional facility. Both immediately said they had mental problems. However, the examination did not reveal any mental abnormalities in them. They were simply stalling for time. 5 months later, Taylor pleaded guilty to 2 counts of first-degree murder in exchange for all other charges being dropped. Taylor admitted at trial that he was the mastermind behind all of this. He attacked Beth and Kay and felt no remorse. The medical examiner found that Kay had 5 wounds, and Beth also was struck by 3 bullets. Rolf was attacked in the face and then doused with gasoline. When Rolf entered the courtroom, Taylor recognized him. Taylor's face was frozen in surprise, even cursed, and could not believe that Rolf had survived. Ultimately, Taylor was sentenced to death. Despite the confession of the mastermind, Edward Deli pleaded not guilty and decided to appear in court. 2 weeks after Taylor was convicted of murder, Deli's trial began. He had no idea that Rolf had survived, but he from the very beginning showed remorse and insisted that he was not involved in the deaths. He did not kill anyone. According to him, the original plan was to rob, and Deli did not expect that Taylor would start killing. He refused to shoot anyone. Naturally, the prosecution tried to portray Deli as exactly the same cruel person as Taylor. He insisted that he could not pull the trigger. This meant that Rolf, who had witnessed the events, could be the defendant's only chance to escape from a lethal injection. Deli's lawyer tried every way to present a favorable picture for him. Linnae also testified in court. She remembered how Deli brought a dog into her room, saying that it should calm her down. Also, he talked to her and Trish to reassure them. It was he who told them to get out of the car when the car stopped. When the court agency discussed finding Deli guilty of second-degree murder, it meant that he received a life sentence, but with the right to parole. The Tiade family filed a lawsuit against the state. They wanted compensation for the deaths of Kay and Beth. According to the survivors, it was the state leadership that was to blame for the escape that the prisoners made from the rehabilitation center, because this led to the bloody massacre. In fact, the claims were quite justified. It became known that on December 22, Von Taylor called his friend named Scott Manley. He told Scott that he and Deli had escaped from a rehabilitation center and also stolen a weapon. Scott admitted that by that time, Taylor and Deli had already robbed several houses in Oakley and now intended to deal with an entire family. Scott was afraid of their intentions and immediately contacted law enforcement officers, telling them about Taylor's confessions. Despite this, the police simply ignored the message. Unfortunately, the court rejected the Teed family's claims, and no one was punished for their negligence. In 2001, Line received a letter from Deli in which he asked for forgiveness. He wrote that life in prison had changed him. Before, he was just a stupid young man who followed the example of a friend who showed him a cool lifestyle. Line read this letter over and over again, in tears and with hatred. Finally, 10 years later, she decided to throw off the burden and wrote a response to Deli, in which she stated that she forgave him. After that, she felt much better. After the verdict was passed, Deli did not try to appeal the court's decision. Most likely, he will never be released from prison, given the severity of the crime in which he took part. Meanwhile, Taylor has filed 4 appeals. He cited various reasons, including the bias of the jury. All these absurd appeals were rejected. However, these appeals helped him repeatedly push back his execution date. Sometime later, Rolf fully recovered from his injuries and renovated the house. He now enjoys spending time remembering his loved ones. Line and Trish got married and became mothers of many children. Long after that, Rolf died of cancer surrounded by loved ones in 2008. The horrific case of the Teed family not only left an indelible mark of loss, but also shook the community to recognize the fragility of personal safety, even in the most peaceful places. The story of Line and Trish Teed's resilience serves as a powerful reminder of the strength of the human spirit in the face of adversity. Decades have passed since the case, but the lessons from this tragedy remain relevant, highlighting the importance of justice, compassion, and the ongoing efforts to protect communities from similar atrocities. Thank you for watching. If you liked my work, subscribe to the channel, support this video with a like, and let's discuss this story in the comments. Thank you all and goodbye. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Claudia Ornisi. On the morning of July 21, 2011, Stefan contacted the police in Cremona, Italy. Stefan, a resident of the city, had a daily routine of visiting his daughter, Claudia, and his 2-year-old granddaughter, Livia, for coffee. He would spend time with them, chatting, discussing news, playing with Livia, and then continuing with his day. However, on this particular morning, Stefan was deeply alarmed when he couldn't follow his usual routine. Stefan called Claudia several times before going to her house, but she did not answer, which made him very worried. Soon after, he went to her house on Via de Galli, rang the doorbell and knocked on the door, but still no one answered. Using a spare key that Claudia had entrusted to him for emergencies, he entered the house. As soon as he stepped inside, he noticed a strange, overwhelming smell that resembled a gas leak. Holding his breath, he began checking the rooms, fearing the worst. When he entered Claudia's bedroom, he discovered her lying motionless on the bed. He tried to wake her by shaking her, but she didn't respond. In a nearby crib was his niece, Livia, also motionless and cold, like Claudia. In a state of panic, Stefan rushed to the neighbors for help. An emergency rescue team of doctors and police arrived at 8:30 a.m., but both Claudia and Livia were dead. Stefan was devastated, especially by the sight of his little granddaughter motionless, wrapped in her blanket in the crib. From the beginning, investigators suspected that Claudia had taken her own life and that of her daughter. However, some inconsistencies have emerged. First, the strong smell of gas was concerning. An expert inspected the apartment and discovered 4 small propane gas cylinders, the kind typically used for camping stoves. One was positioned right next to Claudia's head at the bed, while the other 3 were placed in the corners of the room. It appeared as though she had intentionally filled the room with gas to end her life painlessly. The question, however, is whether 4 small cylinders could release enough gas to reach lethal concentrations in an uninsulated room to kill both Claudia and Livia. The apartment showed signs of ordinary disarray, consistent with a home shared with a young child. On the kitchen table, detectives found 10 nearly empty packages of Xanax, each originally containing 10 pills. Only 5 pills remained across all the packages. What caught their attention was how methodically the empty blister packs were arranged. They were stacked neatly in a row, almost as if placed that way intentionally to draw notice. This meticulous organization seemed unusual for someone in a state of despair and further heightened investigators' suspicions. Any theories needed verification. What investigators uncovered revealed a disturbing scenario. Initially, they considered the possibility that Claudia had attempted to end her life. If she had ingested 95 Xanax tablets, an overdose could have been the cause of death. However, toxicology tests showed that the drug levels in her blood were too low for such an amount. While small traces of the drug were present, they were far from enough to indicate she had taken 95 tablets. The results suggested she had been sedated and lost consciousness. What is suspicious is that Livia's blood test showed the same result as well. Judging from the bedroom scene, it appeared Claudia placed the gas cylinders, sealed their nozzles with duct tape, and began filling the room with gas. She left her daughter in the crib and then lay down next to her. This appeared to suggest a planned suicide murder, but inconsistencies in the story began to surface. For one, Claudia's relatives were firmly against the idea of voluntary suicide. The woman had no known reason to take her own life. She had never suffered from mental illness, harmful addictions, or depression. Moreover, Claudia adored her daughter so much that even if she had wanted to take her own life, she would never allow her beloved child to die. This confidence undermined the detective's suicide theory. Given the circumstances of the victim's life at the time of her death, Claudia Arn was a 40-year-old single mother. She grew up in a warm, loving family environment surrounded by her parents and sisters. She was described as a calm, kind, and pleasant woman, full of life. Motherhood had been a dream come true for her, a way to fully embrace and express her femininity. Claudia had always cherished the idea of having a family and children. Everyone who knew her described her as a devoted mother and role model. It was unimaginable for those close to her that she would harm her child under any circumstances. Though Claudia had experienced challenges in her personal life, they were not significant enough to suggest she would take such a drastic step. No matter how hard the detectives tried to find solid evidence proving this was a voluntary suicide, doubts kept arising. Claudia simply did not have a clear motive to take her life, let alone harm her child. The longer the police analyzed the crime scene, the more discrepancies they uncovered with the original suicide theory. For example, detectives could not find garbage bags in the apartment, where the cardboard packaging for the Xanax blister packs should logically have been discarded. This absence seemed peculiar. If Claudia had decided to commit suicide, taking out the trash would hardly have been a priority. This observation only deepened the mystery further. The detectives questioned whether someone preparing to take 95 pills would also think about taking the time to throw out the trash. Additionally, they noticed that the control levers on the electric meter were lowered and its lid was left open. This also seemed inappropriate for Claudia's situation. However, it was speculated that she might have been afraid an explosion could occur if gas had been filled. Suspicions were further fueled and the autopsy results came in. According to the forensic expert, Claudia and her daughter died from gas poisoning after losing consciousness from the drugs. However, fire experts denied this possibility, given the level of propane saturation in the room. 4 gas cylinders were clearly not enough to kill 2 people. This added weight to the version involving a third party. Investigators began to suspect that Claudia could not have voluntarily left this life. It was alleged that gas poisoning occurred when bags filled with gas were placed on the heads of Claudia and her daughter. Evidence of this came from the characteristic adhesive tape traces found during a thorough examination of the bodies. In this case, only 1 cylinder per person would have been needed, but it was deemed impossible for Claudia to do this by herself. The more the detectives analyzed the evidence, the more obvious it became that this was murder. The suicide theory was quickly abandoned. When detectives inspected the gas cylinders, suspicions only grew stronger, as no fingerprints were found on their surface. The idea that Claudia could have carefully wiped every canister clean before placing it on the floor seemed absurd. While the use of gloves could justify this, no such gloves were found anywhere. Although they might have been discarded, there was no evidence to support this. Additionally, there were no fingerprints on the Xanax blisters either. This raises further concern, as handling removing 95 pills would inevitably leave a trace. It became increasingly clear that detectives were looking for a killer, or potentially multiple killers, who were involved in this crime. Investigators shifted their attention to the gas cylinders and Xanax, focusing on tracing their origin using the serial numbers on the packaging. The process was complex and laborious, as it involved not only the city of Crema but also the entire Lombardia region. Through a thorough investigation, they traced it to the town of Cariati, which has a shopping mall. There, they found a gas canister and Xanax that matched the shipments found at the crime scene. Records showed that the pills were purchased there on July 16, 2011, just 4 days before the tragic incident. However, the buyer paid in cash and used a non-personalized discount card, making it difficult to identify them. Nonetheless, investigators persisted and uncovered that the individual had used the card on July 19 to buy food and beverages in a nearby city. Fortunately, a store clerk remembered the customer, a grumpy man, estimated to be 45 to 50 years old, of average height and elegantly dressed. He spoke eloquently but did not provide his name. The July 19 purchases raised further suspicion, as the man bought adhesive tape, potentially used to secure the buttons on the gas cylinders, causing them to release gas automatically. At this stage, the man's identity was still unknown. Authorities were working to determine who might have had a motive to harm Claudia and her daughter. The evidence suggested someone close to Claudia, as there were no signs of forced entry, indicating that she had willingly allowed the person into her home. This led investigators to focus on people she knew well. Ultimately, they concluded that the prime suspect was her ex-partner, Maurizio Iori, a well-known ophthalmologist in Crema and the biological father of her daughter, Livia. Maurizio was a man of good reputation, with a successful career and a respected family background. Claudia had a brief but intense relationship with him, which started in 2008 when she visited him as a patient. Mauricio's polite, kind, and professional demeanor immediately appealed to Claudia, who was lonely at the time. She quickly developed feelings for him. Being a prominent and accomplished man, he soon invited her on a date, and his refined manners and attentiveness captured her heart. However, their journey toward happiness faced a significant obstacle. Claudia was single and free, while Maurizio was married with 2 children. From the beginning, this bothered Claudia, but Maurizio reassured her that his marriage was troubled and he was planning to get divorced soon. As their relationship deepened, they began meeting in secret, often traveling to other cities to avoid raising suspicion from Mauricio's wife. He explained that secrecy was necessary because if the affair were discovered, it could complicate the divorce process and division of assets. Claudia gradually felt trapped in the role of a mistress and started to question her place in the relationship. Conflicts occasionally surfaced, but Maurizio always managed to calm her down, urging her to wait until the situation was resolved. Her hopes for a better outcome were shattered in May 2008, when Claudia discovered she was pregnant. For Maurizio, the news was unwelcome and infuriating, as he made it clear he did not want children outside of his marriage. This heightened the tension between them, leading to their separation. Claudia pinned her hopes on the child, believing motherhood would bring her happiness and purpose, but instead, the pregnancy further deepened her struggles. After their breakup, Claudia began to see Maurizio differently. She realized he was never truly committed to building a family with her but was only interested in having fun on the side. His politeness and kindness disappeared entirely. He pressured her to have an abortion, but she was shocked and devastated, so she refused and was determined to keep the pregnancy under all circumstances. For 3 months, Maurizio persisted in urging her to end the pregnancy, but Claudia held her ground. Eventually, he met with her again and made his intentions clear. His primary concern was protecting his reputation. He insisted that no one should ever find out about Claudia or their child. He demanded that she keep her distance and avoid contacting him. Claudia, however, refused to comply. Feeling deceived and betrayed, she was determined that her daughter would not grow up in secrecy or obscurity. Resolute in safeguarding her and her child's future, Claudia sought legal help to force Maurizio to recognize his paternity. As Claudia's pregnancy advanced, Maurizio finalized his divorce. To her dismay, she discovered he had started a relationship with another woman before breaking up with her. Even more shocking, this new girlfriend was also expecting a child. This confirmed Claudia's belief that Maurizio had been dishonest and deceitful toward her. In the meantime, he concentrated on safeguarding his own interests. He was preparing to marry his new partner, a wealthy woman who aligned with his social status. He feared that if information about his relationship with Claudia or the fact that he had a child out of wedlock were revealed, his career and reputation would be severely affected. He admitted this fear to Claudia frankly. On February 3, 2009, Claudia gave birth to her daughter, Livia. Over time, Maurizio softened slightly and agreed to provide limited support for Claudia and the baby, who lived with Claudia's parents. He pledged to pay $400 per month for Livia's expenses and purchased an apartment for them, covering its mortgage. However, he restricted himself to visiting his daughter only once a week. This arrangement strained their already tense relationship. Despite everything, Claudia remained hopeful, believing that Maurizio might eventually develop genuine love and affection for Livia, grow into his role as a caring father. The last scheduled meeting between Maurizio and Livia was set for July 20, 2011. Claudia's mother told the police that Claudia had been feeling unwell, and Maurizio planned to visit to support her. He suggested they have dinner featuring sushi, a surprisingly out-of-character choice for him. Claudia's mother immediately found his behavior strange. Maurizio disliked fish and had never stayed with them for more than an hour, let alone brought food or made thoughtful gestures. Additionally, he brought a package of sauce that police would later confirm he had purchased on July 19, 2011, a detail that would become critical in the subsequent investigation. Claudia's mother grew convinced that Maurizio was connected to what happened afterward. Her greatest distress came from Claudia's genuine belief that Maurizio was finally trying to put effort into their relationship. Claudia had been so optimistic about the dinner, even borrowing her mother's best items for the occasion. Tragically, those items were later found the next morning on the lifeless bodies of Claudia and her child. The police quickly launched an investigation and identified Maurizio as the main suspect, bringing him in for questioning. While denying any involvement, he voluntarily went to the station and stated that he had not been at Claudia's apartment that evening. He provided an alibi, claiming that on July 20th, he left his office at 6:30 p.m., got takeaway food, ate it at home, and then went to the cinema at 9 p.m. He said he paid for his movie ticket in cash and returned home to sleep after watching the film. Mauricio's alibi fell apart quickly. He claimed he didn't keep his cinema ticket, but police reviewed security footage and confirmed he wasn't among the 38 people leaving the session. His mobile phone data added to the inconsistencies, as it showed his phone had stayed near a beach house several kilometers away during the entire evening, contradicting his claim of being at the cinema. It became clear that Maurizio had lied about his whereabouts. When police questioned Mauricio's wife, she revealed that she had tried to contact him multiple times without success. Starting at 7:30 p.m. and continuing until 11 p.m., she repeatedly called him, but he never answered. She also tried reaching his office and friends, but no one knew where he was. Eventually, she contacted a neighbor near their beach house, who confirmed seeing Mauricio's car parked outside. Suspecting he was inside, the neighbor called him but received no response. Upon entering the unlocked house, it was empty, but Mauricio's phone had been left behind for the entire evening. As investigators searched the house, they discovered a note addressed to Mauricio, written by Claudia. The note revealed a shocking secret about Mauricio's illegitimate child. The neighbor, who noticed the note, alerted the police for further investigation. Later, Mauricio returned to the beach house around 2 a.m. and called both his wife and the police to assure them he was safe. However, his explanations only deepened suspicions. Police proceeded with the investigation, increasingly convinced that Mauricio's lies and attempts to hide the truth were unraveling. Based on the CCTV footage, he did not return to the beach house, which led investigators to believe that he was at Claudia's house during that time, confronting his daughter and his estranged lover. His alibi was shattered by his wife's nervousness, which further complicated matters. Mauricio, a well-known ophthalmologist, resorted to lying, raising even more suspicion. Evidence against him mounted rapidly. It was revealed that he had purchased multiple packages of Xanax at a shopping center in another city, paying in cash, likely to avoid detection. Store employees later identified him through receipts linking to online orders found on his computer, as well as from search history showing he had researched how to kill someone with propane or Xanax. He seemed particularly interested in the case of a Moroccan prisoner who died due to a propane gas tank. When questioned about these suspicious purchases, including gas cylinders, Mauricio claimed that Claudia had spoken about using them to heat baby food for Livia. However, the Supreme Court found this explanation unconvincing. Overwhelmed by the mounting evidence, he eventually confessed that he had not gone to the cinema that evening as he initially claimed. Instead, he admitted to visiting Claudia and stated that when he left, she and Livia were alive and well. He claimed to have no knowledge of what happened afterward. Mauricio justified his lies as an attempt to conceal his affair from his wife and mislead investigators. Nonetheless, his extramarital relationship, along with his deep resentment toward his daughter Livia, became widely known. During a police search of the house, officers discovered a dramatic letter detailing these incidents and emotions. Claudia described Mauricio as a ruthless and deceitful man who betrayed her. It was after the birth of her child that she felt the full weight of despair. Her frustration stemmed from Mauricio's cold and even cruel behavior toward the baby girl immediately after her birth. It seemed as though he viewed the child as inferior. At the same time, Claudia discovers that Mauricio has an illegitimate child and plans to marry the child's mother soon. The arrival of the baby left Claudia confused and hurt, unable to understand why Mauricio treated her and their child so poorly. It became apparent that he did not consider her his equal, had no intention of marrying her, and had no plans to remain a father to their child, Livia. Meanwhile, Mauricio's mother, Paula, played a dominant role in his life. It was clear that Mauricio was completely under her control. He feared her disapproval and, as an adult, would hide details about his personal life, relationships to avoid her judgment. Even though Paula was unaware of his affair and its consequences, he seemed convinced that Claudia would never gain his mother's acceptance under any circumstances. As a result, he kept Claudia a secret, but she began pressuring him nonetheless. His intentions and motivations were unclear, particularly since he consistently denied any wrongdoing. Most of the evidence in the case was circumstantial, and authorities were unable to locate the murder weapon. Investigators focused on finding a bag of trash from Claudia's apartment, believing it contained critical evidence such as gloves and pill packaging. Mauricio likely disposed of the bag. In her letter, Claudia hinted at being blackmailed, which may have cornered her. Meanwhile, Livia was mostly rejected by Mauricio and encountered hostility even before her birth. The tipping point for Mauricio's decision to kill Claudia and Livia appears to have been her demand that he take full responsibility for Livia, treat her as an equal member of his family, and stop belittling her. Mauricio saw this as a serious threat to his carefully constructed life, his reputation, financial stability, and, above all, his mother's approval. Financial issues played a significant role as well. Claudia did not work, leaving all her expenses to be covered by Mauricio. Evidence revealed that, 3 months before the murder, Maurizio had been researching ways to recover mortgage payments for the apartment he had bought for Claudia. This indicates that he meticulously planned the crime to minimize financial losses stemming from the affair. On the night of October 11, 2011, Claudia and Livia were waiting for Maurizio to visit, as planned. He arrived with sushi, soy sauce, and drinks, all of which had been laced with a sedative. Claudia dressed up and prepared her daughter for the evening, hoping to charm Maurizio and mend their relationship. However, he had come with the intention of committing a double murder. After dinner, Claudia and Livia lost consciousness from the sedatives. Maurizio carries them into the bedroom and stages the scene to make it look like Claudia has harmed her and her daughter. He placed gas-filled bags over their heads, sealing them with tape. Once they were dead, he cleaned the scene thoroughly to remove any evidence, disposed of incriminating items, and left. Around 3 a.m., he drove to his beach house. On October 14, 2011, Maurizio Iori was arrested and charged with the premeditated murders of Claudia and Livia. The trial shocked the public, as it was hard to believe that a respected doctor could kill his mistress and their child. Despite the defense's arguments and requests for a reduced sentence, the court found the crime to be carefully planned. In January 2013, Maurizio Iori was sentenced to life in prison. His lawyers appealed, but the Supreme Court upheld the sentence in 2015. He was also ordered to pay $600,000 in compensation to Claudia's family. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Maurizio maintained his innocence and continued to speak to journalists, describing the trial as unfair and claiming he had been framed by the authorities.